Chapter 960. This medicinal pill was only the size of a thumb, and it was pitch black like an ordinary pill. There was no trace of medicinal pill at all. It was impossible to imagine that such a terrifying tribulation had occurred because of this medicinal pill in the past. The pill felt as light as a feather when he held it in his hand, as if it had no weight at all. This was also the only thing that made this pill different from ordinary items. The reason why the pill seemed to be weightless was not complicated. It was because the pill had completely isolated itself from all the influence of the laws in this battlefield. At the same time, it also isolated itself from all the forces that the battlefield had on it. As a result, it was as if it had no weight at all. As for why the pill seemed so ordinary like a mud ball, there was nothing special about it. It was just the concealment of a divine item. Luo Fan let out a long breath as he held the pill. This pill was condensed from the nearly endless amount of alchemy materials he had, and it could break the shackles of the world, allowing him to completely transcend the restrictions of the world and completely recover all of his strength. As long as he consumed it, there was a very high chance that he could completely shatter the shackles of the world, saving him millions of years of time. This was extremely important to him, so even he couldn't help but feel a little shocked. At this moment, Luo Fan raised his brows and looked up. Although there was a thick mountain wall above his head that blocked everything above him, his eyes penetrated through the layers of obstacles and directly saw the scene in the sky above him. At this moment, dozens of figures were gathering over from all directions at an unimaginable speed. In a short moment, they had already formed their own figures in the sky. There were several dozen extremely powerful experts. Every single one of them was several times stronger than the expert that Luo Fan had wiped out along with the entire city. Dozens of them gathered in the sky. Although they did not release their auras wantonly, their auras still faintly affected the surrounding void, causing the void within a radius of several thousand kilometers to look like a small boat in the middle of an ocean, as if it could be destroyed at any moment. These figures looked at each other and seemed to be communicating with each other. They then swept their gazes around the area, clearly searching for something. Luo Fan could guess why they had come when he saw their expressions. It must have been because of the drastic change caused by the pill he had refined earlier, which had piqued their interest. As a result, they had rushed over from all over the battlefield, and in the end, they had all gathered in the sky here. However, although the pill tribulation from before could practically destroy thousands of great thousand worlds, it had been carried out by tearing space apart, and the majority of the fluctuations were suppressed in the cave. Only a small portion of it had spread out and was sensed by the life forms in the outside world. Thus, although they could sense that something unbelievable was happening here, they could not determine the exact location. They could only determine a rough range. That was why this situation had appeared. Even if Luo Fan didn't go through these 10 years of cultivation, he still had the absolute strength to avoid their perception. Not to mention that he had already recovered everything that could be recovered from the loosening of the shackles of the world. To these experts, he was much stronger. With a thought, the cave seemed to not exist in their senses. They couldn't even sense the existence of the cave, not to mention Luo Fan, who was in the cave. As a result, even though they were all powerful cultivators, no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't find any trace of abnormality when they gathered in one place. They had lived in the battlefield for millions of years, so they naturally did not lack patience. Furthermore, it was rare for them to gather together. Although they couldn't find any abnormal traces, they did not immediately disperse. Instead, they conversed with each other as they continued to search. Of course, to them, searching for abnormalities was secondary. Conversely, it was more important to communicate with the experts who had gathered here at the same time. Seeing their actions, Luo Fan could not help but smile and no longer paid any attention to them. With a thought, he opened his mouth and swallowed the pellet in his hand. He didn't even want to find another quiet place to consume the pill. Instead, he directly consumed the pill in a place where dozens of experts were spying on him. Such a method was so straightforward that it was unimaginable. As soon as the pellet entered his stomach, it suddenly trembled and turned into nothingness, as if it had completely disappeared in an instant. As it turned into nothingness, in Luo Fan's eyes, a fist-sized, pitch-black fog suddenly appeared on top of the world's shackles that had tightly locked his body. Although he had used some means to transcend the tribulation, a fist-sized, pitch-black fog suddenly appeared. After this black fog appeared, it flowed along the surface of the world's shackles. During this process, it continuously seeped into the countless cracks on the world's shackles. The cracks on the world's shackles were thin, dense, and endless. In comparison, the amount of the black fog seemed extremely small, as if it could not even fill up a 10,000th of the world's shackles. However, the black fog was mysterious and unusual. It seemed like it would never be depleted. Although the black fog constantly flowed out, it still invaded the world's shackles. But no matter how much black fog flowed out, even though it seemed to be millions of times more than the original black fog, the black fog didn't seem to be damaged at all. It didn't increase or decrease, and it looked exactly the same as it was at the beginning. Under such circumstances, no matter how large the world's shackles were, no matter how many people there were, they were still completely enveloped by the black fog after a few breaths. The entire world's shackles looked like they were made of a pitch-black substance. As Luo Fan watched these changes, a faint smile gradually appeared on his face. It's indeed effective. I didn't waste so much effort to refine this pill in vain. Such a thought flashed through his mind. However, this was the extent of the medicinal effect of the pill. Although the entire world's shackles were dyed pitch black, it did not completely shatter the world's shackles, nor did it completely break the world's shackles. Luo Fan was not surprised by this. After all, the world's shackles were world shackles. No matter how powerful the pill was, without the support of external forces, it was unlikely to completely collapse and break the world's shackles. However, Luo Fan was already prepared for this. With a slight thought, an extremely dazzling bright red light shot out from his body. It turned into a beam of light and directly collided with the world's shackles that had already condensed into a pitch-black color. This bright red light was brighter and more dazzling than all the bright red lights that Luo Fan had used in the past. However, this did not mean that the mysterious trend of the times contained in it was more profound than all the bright red lights that Luo Fan had used in the past. This was just a method of application, but the mysterious trend of the times it contained was no different from before. It was still less than a billionth of the entire trend of the times, and it was still insignificant. If this bright red light collided with the world's shackles under normal circumstances, even if the world's shackles already had countless cracks and looked like they could shatter at any time, the result would definitely be the world's shackles counterattacking. It would directly affect Luo Fan's body through this light, causing Luo Fan to suffer the crushing pressure of the entire dreamscape. Even if he did not die, he would definitely suffer injuries that he would not be able to recover from for tens of thousands of years. However, the moment the bright red light collided with the world's shackles shook violently. Although they did not shatter immediately, they did not counterattack violently either. They did not affect Luo Fan in the slightest. Evidently, because of the fluid-like black fog, the connection between the world's shackles and dreamscape had been completely cut off. At this moment, the world's shackles were just a rather tough kind of shackles. Although they were still difficult to break, the difficulty of breaking them was millions of times lower than before. This kind of shackles was no longer a problem for Luo Fan. He mustered his strength and turned the bright red light around him. He released his strength out of his body in a frenzy, intertwining with the bright red light and instantly forming a huge flag. After the flag appeared, the entire space in the cave was dyed bright red. It was as if the entire space had been controlled by the flag, turning into a bright red space. There was even a completely independent aura being emitted from the cave. Anyone who sensed this change would know that the cave's connection with the outside world had been completely cut off. At this moment, the space in the cave was complete. It was not affected by the outside world, and it was completely under the flag's control, even space-time. After this change appeared, Luo Fan did not hesitate at all. He unfurled the flag, and the surface of the flag extended endlessly. In an instant, it was like a long river that wrapped around the shackles in countless layers. The shackles were completely wrapped in the bright red flag, causing the shackles to disappear without a trace from the outside world. At this moment, the space-time in the cave rapidly compressed. As it compressed, the bright red light on the flag became even brighter. It looked as if the entire space was gradually being absorbed by the flag. After a few dozen breaths, the originally huge space in the cave had been compressed to a radius of several meters. It was just enough for Luo Fan and the flag to exist. Right at this moment, a thunderous boom rang out. As this boom rang out, dense cracks that resembled spiderwebs appeared in the sky above the entire battlefield world. The cracks seemed like the entire sky was going to shatter in the next moment. It looked so dangerous and sinister that all the living beings in the battlefield could not help but feel an indescribable fear. They were afraid that the sky would shatter, afraid that the world would be destroyed, and afraid of their fates. At this moment, a giant hand appeared out of thin air in the sky. It gently swiped at the densely packed cracks that were like a spider's web. The countless cracks seemed to have never appeared, and they completely disappeared. After that, the huge hand disappeared just like how it had appeared. No one knew how it had disappeared. All the living beings looked at the sky and felt like they were dreaming. If it were not for the fact that many of their companions around them were witnesses, they might even wonder if they were hallucinating. The giant hand that had appeared in the sky earlier was extremely huge. It seemed to be able to cover the sky when it was spread out. However, it was extremely agile and nimble. When it moved across the sky, it was like an ordinary person moving across a piece of paper. It seemed so natural, so relaxed, and so carefree. When a huge hand appeared, the many powerhouses in the battlefield all sensed a boundless will flash by. In the face of this will, the will that they thought was powerful was like a piece of paper. The feeling of being insignificant was so deep in their bones that they even had the urge to worship that will. That's the creator. In a mountain range where Luo Fan was, one of the dozens of powerhouses exclaimed in shock. It's definitely the creator of the universe. Only the creator of the universe would have such means and will. Another cultivator sighed, his eyes filled with despair. All of them had passed through rounds after rounds of bloody battles to reach this place. Although they had lived in this world of battlefield for millions or even tens of millions of years, and they seemed to have lived for a long time, they were actually still in the midst of bloody battles. They were the warriors that were participating in the 9th round of bloody battles. The goal of this last round of bloody battles was to defeat the Creator. If they did not defeat the Creator, they would never be able to leave this battlefield. The world of this battlefield was vast and boundless, and the cultivation resources within it were extremely abundant. Experts like them could obtain terrifying improvements that they could not obtain in other worlds. However, a battlefield was a battlefield. No matter how big it was, no matter how good the conditions were, it could not change the fact that it was just a battlefield. Although it was good to survive here, it was far from obtaining true freedom. How could these powerhouses tolerate that? Under such circumstances, the motivation for these powerhouses to cultivate was to continuously improve their strength and eventually defeat the Creator, completing the 9th round of bloody battles to obtain true freedom and true freedom. It was because almost all of them had this goal. At this moment, when they saw the godly powers of the Creator and felt the will of the Creator, they would feel despair. The godly powers that the Creator had displayed and the strength of His will made them feel that they would never be able to reach that realm even if they spent endless years and lived until the end of the world. For them, who had cultivated and even survived to defeat the Creator, how could this not be a form of despair? Obviously, it was not only the powerhouses in this mountain range who were in despair. Among the many experts in the battlefield, almost all of them who had a clear understanding of the situation were filled with despair. Among them, there were even many powerhouses who could not bear such a blow of despair and directly committed suicide unwilling to continue fighting for that unattainable goal. It was not that they were not strong-willed enough, but they were too arrogant. They were so arrogant that they thought that living in such a never-ending battlefield was a torture worse than death. That was why they made such a choice. How could the experts who were able to survive the previous 8 rounds of bloody battles and survive in this battlefield world be weak-willed people? Luo Fan didn't care what kind of incredible changes were happening outside at this time. In fact, he was fully aware that all his actions at this moment were probably seen by the Creator. After all, the Creator was the existence who created the entire dream world. He naturally had absolute control over the entire dream world. How could Luo Fan not have attracted his attention after causing such a huge commotion? However, he did not take the Creator's possible threat or the possibility of stopping him to heart. The reason was simple. According to the situation in this dream world, the Creator was simply a battle maniac. What he sought in his life was for someone to fight with him to his heart's content. Moreover, from his current position, he seemed to possess a soaring heroic spirit, placing himself in a position where everyone could see him as long as they were powerful enough to reach a certain level. With his personality, he would only worry that his opponent was not powerful enough, and Luo Fan's action of increasing his strength was exactly what he wanted. He was already being fair by not creating any favorable conditions for Luo Fan. So how could he stop him? At this moment, Luo Fan did not pay attention to the drastic changes that happened in the outside world. If he had, he would know that his guess was completely correct. The Creator was indeed happy to see it happen. Otherwise, why would he just completely erase the countless cracks in the sky and completely ignore the source that caused them? At this moment, Luo Fan felt an indescribable comfort all over his body. The oppressive feeling that he had ever since he stepped into this dream world had completely disappeared. Endless power, spirit, will, perception, and so on, everything that he originally possessed, were frantically pouring into his body from an extremely mysterious place. His cultivation level, his strength, his soul, his will, his senses, and so on were all improving by leaps and bounds. Almost every breath he took was a doubling of his strength. Such a change was obvious that the world's shackles had been completely shattered by the Era flag. The entire dream world's restriction on his strength had completely disappeared. Chapter 961. At this moment, the originally huge space in the cave had shrunk to an insignificant size that could barely accommodate Luo Fan. This shrinking of space was not the kind that squeezed his position from all directions. Instead, the entire space had shrunk completely. Around him, if he turned around slightly, he would be able to touch the walls of the cave that were originally quite far away. However, it did not seem like the cave wall was getting closer to him. Instead, it seemed like his entire body had expanded by many times until the space inside the cave could barely accommodate him. This could be seen from the various proportionally reduced features on the surrounding cave walls. One could imagine the mystery of the shrinking space. Luo Fan sat cross-legged with his eyes open and closed. His entire body and mind were constantly climbing to an unimaginable peak. His aura kept growing, and it went from a state where he had barely stepped into the Tao integration realm to a state where he was close to breaking through to the Tao integration realm. Although this process was extremely smooth, there were too many things that he needed to grow. Even though it was so smooth and there were no obstacles, it took him more than 120 years to complete this mysterious process. After more than 120 years, when Luo Fan returned from that strange realm where his body and mind were growing infinitely, an unimaginable feeling surged in his heart. In an instant, the entire dreamscape seemed to have no secrets left in his eyes. With a single glance, the battlefield, the entire dreamscape, the countless living beings, and even the larger world outside the blood battlefield pyramid were all imprinted in his eyes without reservation. He raised his head and looked up. His eyes pierced through all the visible and invisible barriers, and he saw the majestic palace hanging high in the void, right in the center of the entire dream world. The palace was empty, and an incredibly powerful aura filled the palace. Millions of living beings were doing all kinds of ordinary things, such as cleaning the palace, fighting against each other, and even scheming against each other. There were all kinds of strange things, and almost all the things that all living beings were doing were displayed here. Luo Fan's line of sight directly passed through the obstruction of the palace, and saw that on the throne in the main hall of the palace, a middle-aged man was sitting on the throne like a dragon or tiger. His appearance looked extremely simple. Although he was sitting there motionlessly, he naturally gave off a charm of a magnificent army waiting to attack. This person was the creator of the universe. He was the supreme existence that had wiped out the countless cracks that could have caused the complete collapse of the entire battlefield world with a gentle swipe of his hand. Before Luo Fan's line of sight reached him, his eyes were closed. It was unknown whether he was spiritually wandering or resting. However, the moment Luo Fan's line of sight penetrated the countless barriers and landed on him, the man's body trembled and his tightly closed eyes suddenly opened. In an instant, it was as if two vast universes were directly imprinted in Luo Fan's eyes. The man's eyes were extremely dark and deep. There was an infinite vast void, an infinite number of nebulae, and an infinite complex space-time structure. Everything was like two real universes coming at him. This caused Luo Fan to involuntarily feel a kind of mysterious sensation. He felt as if everything about him was seen through by the other party. "Is it finally done?" the creator said faintly. His voice was extremely soft. Even if one was a few feet away from him, one would probably not be able to hear what he was saying. However, this voice was extremely mysterious. It penetrated all barriers and directly entered Luo Fan's ears, making Luo Fan feel as if he was whispering into his ears. Such mysteries could not be described with words. Indeed, the Creator is the Creator. No matter how I hide, I can't escape your perception. Luo Fan sighed. The moment he saw the appearance of the Creator and sensed the aura of the Creator, he already understood what kind of existence the Creator was and how powerful the Creator was. As a matter of fact, the Creator was only a great perfection quasi-saint. Moreover, he was not a great accomplishment quasi-saint, but a great accomplishment quasi-saint who had just stepped into the great accomplishment quasi-saint realm. Of course, the omniscient and omnipotent aura he displayed did not come from his cultivation as a greater completion quasi-sage. Instead, it came from the fact that he was the creator of this dreamscape. This dreamscape was the fundamental reason why he was able to create this world. In other words, the reason why he seemed so unfathomable at this moment was not because of his own abilities, but the effect of him fusing with this dream world. Although thou art now at the peak of the world, thou is still not as good as me. Art thou really going to challenge me now? The Creator did not answer Luo Fan's question. Haha, I've already reached the peak. If I don't have any special comprehension, I won't make much progress, even if I cultivate for billions of years. It's just a waste of time. I might as well give it a try. Who knows, I might be able to comprehend something. Luo Fan smiled faintly and stood up slowly. As he stood up, his aura began to spread out unscrupulously. This space, which was originally just enough to accommodate him sitting cross-legged, began to gradually expand as his aura surged. The walls around him kept retreating during this process, causing the space around him to become larger and larger. From the looks of it, it was obvious that the space in the area couldn't withstand the explosive increase in his aura. As his aura grew, it was suppressed by his aura, causing it to involuntarily expand and grow. Luo Fan's aura grew extremely fast. In the blink of an eye, it had already surpassed his previous limit. It directly pressed the space inside the cave back to its original size, making the cave seem as if it had completely returned to its original appearance. After that, his aura continued to grow crazily, but it did not continue to suppress the space. Instead, it gushed out from the entrance of the cave and radiated towards the battlefield world. Moreover, because there was no rebound from the expansion of the space, the area covered by the aura grew more than 10,000 times faster than before. In the blink of an eye, it had covered the entire mountain range. In the blink of an eye, It had covered 1/10,000th of the dream world. In the blink of an eye, it had covered 1,000th of the dream world. In a short span of a few dozen breaths, the entire vast battlefield world was completely enveloped by Luo Fan's aura. All living beings in the battlefield world, even those with the weakest senses, instantly understood that a supreme existence that was countless times more powerful than them and could almost rival the Creator had descended into this world. In the past, there had been dozens of experts searching for what had caused the anomaly in this mountain range that Luo Fan was in. However, it had been more than 120 years since then. Although those experts were very patient, none of them were willing to search aimlessly for more than 100 years. They had all left this place decades ago. Therefore, at this moment, there were no experts in this mountain range. Only some exotic beasts that were similar to the mutant bear from back then treated this place as a battlefield. They were killing each other everywhere, intending to determine the strongest expert in this mountain range. When Luo Fan's aura erupted, they bore the brunt of it and naturally passed out from the pressure. When his aura enveloped the entire battlefield world, Luo Fan's aura had already reached the peak of the Tao integration perfected stage. There was even a faint trace of transcendence contained in his aura. Obviously, because of the tribulation in this dream world, although Luo Fan did not fully understand the secrets of the transcendent realm and become a transcendent being, he had gained great enlightenment and had vaguely found the way to transcend. This was why there was a trace of transcendence contained in his aura. With this brand new enlightenment, the current Luo Fan was more than 10 times stronger than before he stepped into this dream world. Although it could not be said that he could completely crush him, he already had a great advantage. If they were to fight under the same conditions, the possibility of losing was very, very small. The Creator was high up in the center of this dream world. He could see all the developments in this dream world. When he discovered that Luo Fan's aura had reached such a level, 2 blazing rays of light suddenly flashed in his eyes. In fact, even his breathing had vaguely sped up, and the aura he gave off suddenly contained a hint of iron-bloodedness. The eyes of the tens of millions of living beings that had manifested from his aura instantly turned bloodshot, and their hearts were filled with endless fighting spirit. They all shouted, and the originally rather quiet palace turned into a hubbub. Shockwaves from the rumbling battle erupted in all directions. If this palace had not been built by the Creator and had not reached the limits of this dream world in terms of sturdiness, perhaps this change would have been enough to directly collapse the palace. Good. I didn't expect you to be this strong. He shouted and slowly stood up. With a light stride, his figure was like flowing water. In an instant, he crossed who knows how many kilometers and appeared outside the palace. Floating high in the void, he lowered his head and used his eyes to look down at a certain mountain range in the battlefield world. He looked down at the mountain range, at Luo Fan, who was blocked by the thick mountain. Just as he finished doing all this, the entire region trembled. The entire mountain range seemed to have been piled up into powder, instantly turning into fine powder. The shocking aura swept through the entire battlefield world in an instant, causing the entire battlefield world to be shrouded in a thin layer of smoke. It took a long time for it to disappear. Between the mountain range, Luo Fan's figure appeared among the ruins. He took a deep breath, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He looked up at the sky, at the Creator, who knew how far away. Come on. The Creator's eyes were filled with fighting spirit as he said softly. These words were the same as the previous ones. They could not be heard at close range, but they directly passed through the endless distance and directly entered Luo Fan's ears. It made Luo Fan feel as if it was whispering into his ear. Luo Fan had already prepared everything. At this moment, he naturally did not hold back. With a thought, the era flag appeared above his head. With a shake, space-time shattered. The unknown number of space-time layers between him and the Creator disappeared in an instant. He didn't even need to move. His figure had already appeared in front of the Master of Creation. He was less than 10 feet away from him. The aura on his body was completely restrained in an instant. It was directly absorbed into his body, making him look like an ordinary person. At this moment, the countless living beings in the entire battlefield world seemed to have been relieved of a mountain that was hundreds of millions of feet tall, and they felt extremely relaxed. Almost all of them were breathing heavily, as if they had just survived a calamity. However, it was only the majority. The powerhouses who were powerful enough turned their eyes to the sky. They looked at the sky, which seemed normal, but vaguely had a destructive aura. The Creator's palace hung high in the center of the world. In the battlefield world, it seemed to be in the sky that was infinitely high and far away. There was no obstruction around the palace, so any living being that was powerful enough could directly see the magnificent palace in the sky with their own eyes. Hence, living beings that were powerful enough would naturally be able to see the two figures that had appeared outside the palace at this moment. Of course, the more powerful a living being was, the clearer they could see, while the weaker a living being was, the more blurry they could see. The reason why they were so concerned was that they had clearly thought of their ultimate goal in entering this battlefield world. They remembered that challenging the Creator was their ultimate goal of survival. Hence, at this moment, they all thought of the various abnormalities that happened just now. It was the supreme powerhouse who had spread his aura throughout the entire dream world who had issued a direct challenge to the Creator. This was related to everyone's fate and whether they could obtain true freedom, so they had no choice but to be concerned. There were two possibilities for the challenger to issue a challenge. One was failure, and the other was success. If the challenger failed, there was naturally no need to say anything. They would just be watching a huge show, and nothing would change from before. If the challenger succeeded, he, the challenger, would become the new Creator. He would become the absolute controller above them, and their fate would be in the hands of a single thought. If the new Creator was willing, he could even directly release all of them. Even if the new Creator was ambitious and had other ideas, there was a high possibility that they would no longer have to stay in this battlefield and wait for the distant transcendence. After realizing this, how could these powerhouses not care about the Creator's battle? How could they not add their own expectations to it? Luo Fan and the Creator naturally did not care about the countless living beings below. To the Creator of the universe, those creatures were just his creations, or rather, his playthings. How could he possibly care about their thoughts? To Luo Fan, these powerhouses were merely phantoms, existences that were similar to thoughts created by the great accomplishment sage-to-be. If he could not defeat the great accomplishment sage-to-be, he would naturally have the patience to communicate and interact with them. However, the great accomplishment sage-to-be was already in front of him as the Creator. Why would he care about their thoughts? Therefore, whether it was Luo Fan or the great accomplishment sage-to-be, they did not care about the countless gazes and expectations on them. They only had eyes for each other. Actually, I admire you very much. Luo Fan looked at the Creator and sighed. You are now qualified to say such words before me, the Creator said faintly. The strength and willpower displayed by Luo Fan had made the Creator unable to treat him as the same as his other creations. Instead, he treated Luo Fan as if he was on the same level as himself. Placing one's own existence in front of all living beings, occupying a supreme position, and looking forward to the challenges of all living beings. Such heroism, even if I were to think about it, I would only feel shocked. If it were me, I would definitely not be able to do this, Luo Fan said with a smile. The Creator's expression did not change because of Luo Fan's admiration. He was still calm and filled with a strong will to fight. His eyes were still fixed on Luo Fan, as if he was constantly measuring Luo Fan's strength and waiting for Luo Fan's attack. Even without the support of the Creator's identity, he was still a powerful, great accomplishment quasi-saint. One could imagine how firm his willpower was. How could he be affected by a few words of praise from his opponent? After Luo Fan finished speaking, the Creator smiled faintly and said, You are the first challenger that appeared after I created this world. It was you who made me believe that my various plans were feasible, so I will remember you forever. I don't think I will lose. The most important reason why I can cultivate to my current strength is that I have absolute confidence. Even if you are the creator of this world, you are just an opponent that I must defeat, Luo Fan said with a faint smile. Although you are my creation, you are qualified to receive my admiration. You stood in front of me with the body of an ant. Your journey of struggle is filled with an extremely strong and firm will. This is something that I can't create. However, it is only admiration. If you want to defeat me, you are still too inexperienced. The creator looked at Luo Fan. His aura was faintly discernible, and the entire dreamscape trembled slightly. This made Luo Fan feel like he was being watched by the entire world. Chapter 963. In the face of such a terrifying the creator, Luo Fan looked solemn and did not say anything else. With a thought, the era flag, which was more realistic than any of the era flags that he had used in this world, appeared above his head. In an instant, a bright red light shone out, enveloping the entire battlefield world in this bright red light. Shockingly, this was an absolutely complete banner, and had even undergone some mysterious breakthroughs. It was a banner that was even more powerful than the banner of the era he had unleashed in the past. This flag could even be considered a powerful magic treasure at the moment. It directly pushed his strength to the limit and allowed him to unleash the strength that generally only existences at the great perfection saged to be could unleash. It was also because of this confidence that he dared to come before the creator and challenge the creator. This was also the fundamental method that he had used to defeat the Talisman King in the previous dream world. Seeing Luo Fan like this, the creator smiled faintly and did not stop him. He just looked at Luo Fan and waited for him to make a move. Bright red shrouded the entire battlefield world, and there seemed to be some extremely subtle changes. The connection between the entire world and the outside dream world seemed to have become even more blurred at this moment. Vaguely, the many experts in the world seemed to feel that there was a possibility for their strength to improve further. It was as if their potential had been strengthened by the bright red light. The reason for this was very simple. The bright red light carried the mysteries of the era tide and naturally had the power to change the laws and orders of this world. In the past, when Luo Fan's strength had barely reached the Tao integration realm by relying on the era flag technique, he could only unleash a little of this power and could not even break the world shackles on him. However, at this moment, his cultivation realm had completely recovered to the Tao integration realm, and he even vaguely understood some secrets of transcendence. This power could naturally be unleashed to its fullest, resulting in a completely different effect than before he had recovered all his strength. As a result, the laws and orders of the entire battlefield world changed, and from another perspective, the shackles on all living beings were loosened. In the face of this change, most of the living beings completely forgot about the upcoming battle between Luo Fan and the creator and found a secluded place to cultivate in seclusion. Clearly, they regarded cultivation and power as an existence that completely suppressed everything else. In their opinion, even the battle between Luo Fan and the creator could not be compared to the slight progress of their own strength. Of course, such existences were only about half of them. The other half were more concerned about the upcoming battle between Luo Fan and the creator and did not care about their strength that seemed to be able to increase again. These people were clearly more rational. They knew that Luo Fan was their greatest hope of obtaining freedom. Although they did not pin all their hopes on Luo Fan, they were more confident in him. They believed that the increase in their cultivation level would not change the situation, but Luo Fan's actions could reverse their situation. For a moment, the number of people watching Luo Fan and the creator decreased by more than half. At that moment, Luo Fan focused all his attention on the creator in front of him and did not care about the changes in the battlefield world at all. Bright red light contained a trace of the profoundness of the trend of the times. Under the change of the light, the entire battlefield world changed, causing the connection between the creator and dreamscape to weaken by many times. Although he was still the creator and still had endless special authority in dreamscape, He could no longer be omnipotent and omniscient like before. Instead, he was equivalent to a slightly more powerful great accomplishment quasi-saint who had a deeper understanding of rules, laws, and Tao. In this way, although he was still much stronger than ordinary great accomplishment quasi-saints, he was no longer as invincible to Luo Fan as before. In fact, Luo Fan even felt that he could not defeat him. Facing the creator like this, Luo Fan naturally would not be courteous at all. He lifted his hand and pointed. The era flag trembled slightly, and the flag turned into a long river. It suddenly surged through the void and circled around in a mysterious trajectory towards the creator. The creator was a sage-to-be in the advanced stage. Even though the flag of time had cut off most of his connection with the dream world, he was still a sage-to-be in the advanced stage. There was no need to describe how strong he was. Such a long, bright red river was an existence that other living beings could not resist, but it was just a little trouble for him. The creator raised his hand and pointed. Countless chains appeared out of thin air and instantly wrapped around the era flag at an unimaginable speed that seemed to surpass time. The long river-like flag was directly locked in place in the void. Although the tail of the flag was only a few feet away from the creator, it could not take another step forward. It could not be like how it dealt with the previous great accomplishment quasi-saint in Dreamscape and bring him into the universe created by the era flag. Each of these chains seemed to have been created since ancient times and would reach the end of the world. They seemed to be indestructible and indestructible until the end of the universe. They also seemed to have completely fused with the world, giving off a feeling that if one wanted to destroy them, they would have to destroy the entire dreamscape. These chains were very similar to the shackles of the world that had previously locked Luo Fan's power. Clearly, this was a mysterious technique that the creator had created with the help of the shackles of the world. In the face of such a shackle, Luo Fan frowned, but he did not seem discouraged or annoyed. Although this technique was powerful, it was not powerful enough to make him despair. Although he had not completely guessed this technique, he had expected that it would not be able to completely deal with the creator. Therefore, with a single thought, the pole of the era flag shook slightly and rapidly elongated. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge pillar that could support the sky and slam down on the creator. The era flag had two parts. One was the flag surface, and the other was the pole. Ever since it was created, Luo Fan had only used the flag surface of the era flag, but he had never used the pole. However, that did not mean that the era flag only had various mysterious powers. It was just that just using the flag surface was enough for him to face all kinds of challenges, so he did not need to use the pole to attack. Although the flagpole had become incomparably huge, and the surface of the flag was locked by countless strange world chains, there wasn't the slightest bit of awkwardness in the process of it smashing down towards the creator. It seemed incomparably natural and contained a mysterious charm, making people feel that this was the normal way to use the flagpole. The power of the pole was extremely terrifying. It was even more terrifying than the attack from the pill calamity that Luo Fan had encountered previously. However, such a terrifying bombardment did not have any effect on time or space. It was as if it was just an ordinary bombardment, an ordinary pole that was lightly slamming toward someone. With just a thought from the creator, countless chains appeared out of thin air and wrapped around the flagpole. He wanted to lock the flagpole up like the flag. But at this moment, a faint smile appeared on Luo Fan's face. With just a shake of the flagpole, the innumerable world chains that had completely fixed the flag in the void, unable to budge at all, were directly shattered like sand. All the world chains instantly turned into smoke and seeped into the space, as if they had never appeared before. The instant the shackles collapsed, the entire dream realm trembled slightly. A dull shattering sound echoed in the ears of every living being in the dream realm. Since Luo Fan still dared to use such a method to attack the creator after the flag surface was locked by the shackles of the world, it was obvious that he had absolute confidence that the pole could not be locked by the shackles of the world. The banner of the era was the core of the profound mysteries that Luo Fan had comprehended from the tide of the era. He had condensed countless kinds of power into a combination of power or a kind of magical ability. This kind of magical power could exert the power of the tide of the era to its limit. The tide of the era was a kind of supreme existence that could change the entire Earth and the universe, causing the entire universe to undergo an earth-shattering change every 6 billion years. Such an existence could change time, change space, change the rules, change the great path, and even the saints could not resist its power. They could only avoid it and use all kinds of methods to avoid it. Although such a terrifying existence only had a trace of the mysteries, when it was exerted to its limit, it would possess all kinds of unimaginable power. The flag's surface contained an incomparably complete and mysterious universe. It could simulate all the living beings in the projection of all the eras that Luo Fan had experienced, thus destroying all living beings. As for this flagpole, it did not have many other functions. It only had one function, and that was to exert its destructive power to its limit. The tide of the era, in order to make the universe reincarnate, naturally needed to erupt with a power that was close to destroying the world at the end of every era. Only then could it create new life in the midst of destruction and establish a brand new era. As such, it naturally had to contain boundless destructive power. Even if it was only a trace of such destructive power, its power could naturally be imagined. Destroying the shackles of the world was just a piece of cake. It could be said that the power contained in this pole was the tide of the era that Yin Qingsheng understood. It was also the so-called destructive power in her eyes. Facing this pole that could directly destroy the shackles of the world, the Creator frowned. His body swayed, and he raised his hand to draw a circle in the air. A transparent disk that seemed to be formed by 3 concentric circles appeared in front of his palm. This disk had a diameter of 3 meters. There were countless mysterious and complicated patterns on it. It even contained all kinds of profoundness. Countless strange runes were roaming in it, shining brightly. This disk wasn't fixed. After it appeared, it started to contract slightly, as if it was breathing. It was also like a beating heart. It was filled with invisible vitality. After this disk appeared, the entire dreamscape shook slightly. It seemed to have dimmed a little. Following that, the innermost circle of the disk suddenly lit up. A beam of light shot out from it and directly blasted towards the pole that Luo Fan used to attack him. This beam of light was dusky. It seemed to contain everything, yet it also seemed as if nothing existed. It faintly revealed a chaotic aura, just like the chaotic void that evolved at the end of the pill tribulation. Under this beam of light, the space and time in the path of the beam of light melted like snow meeting the sun. It even evaporated and disappeared. This made the beam of light seem as if it had traveled through space and time. As soon as it appeared, it had already collided with the pole. It seemed as if there was no process at all. A soft cracking sound was heard. The pole slightly paused. The attack that was originally enough to destroy everything turned from extreme movement to extreme stillness. It was as if it was directly fixed in the void and couldn't move an inch forward. The beam of light shot out by the disk was also fixed in the void. It was like a real stone house. It couldn't move an inch forward, but it didn't dissipate either. At the point of contact between the two, countless strange light spots scattered in all directions. Some of these light spots were dusky, while others were bright red. Clearly, they were part of the pole and the beam of light. However, due to the collision between the two, they were separated from each other and scattered in all directions. When these light spots separated from the two, they were extremely small like powder. However, the closer they were to the two, the larger they became. In the end, they all turned into irregular meteorites that seemed to be hundreds of feet in diameter. Some were bright red, some were dusky. They directly fell from the void, passing through layers of space and time. Their speed became faster and faster, and their momentum became more and more astonishing as they fell towards the battlefield world. In just a few breaths' time, These meteorites with a diameter of 100 jong directly smashed into the ground of the battlefield world, covering almost half of the battlefield world. A deafening rumble rang out, causing the entire battlefield world to tremble violently. Countless living beings within the battlefield world died from the impact and the tremors. Of course, most of these living beings were native beasts of this world. The experts who came to this battlefield world through rounds of bloody battles rarely lost their lives to such collisions unless they were extremely unlucky. After all, they were much more intelligent than the beasts. Such intelligence allowed them to react in various ways the instant the collisions occurred. In the end, they dodged the direct collision and escaped with their lives. When such a change occurred, even the experts who had high hopes for Luo Fan changed their expressions greatly. They wanted nothing more than for Luo Fan to immediately admit defeat. They had only just started fighting, and such terrifying aftershocks had already occurred, causing the entire world to tremble. If this continued, wouldn't the entire world be destroyed in their battle? With their strength, there was no way they could survive the destruction of the world. Previously, they had high hopes for Luo Fan, but Luo Fan didn't care. Now, he didn't care either. With a thought in his mind, the flagpole turned slightly and trembled in the void. It drew an arc in the air that contained the mysteries of a supreme martial art. It broke free from the obstruction of the light beam, trembled slightly in the void, and continued to blast towards the master of creation. Although it was blocked by the light beam just now, the flagpole wasn't destroyed after all. This meant that the power of the flagpole was enough to threaten the creator. With that, how could Luo Fan, who had incomparably rich battle experience, let go of such an opportunity? He naturally continued to use the flagpole to attack the creator. The creator's desire for battle was so strong that he would dream of countless battles even in his dreams. Naturally, he was in existence with extremely rich battle experience. He naturally had a way to deal with Luo Fan's method. He raised his hand and turned it. The light beam emitted by the disk shadow turned slightly and drew a mysterious arc in the void. It directly blocked in front of the flagpole, wanting to collide with the flagpole and continue to block it. Naturally, Luo Fan wasn't willing. The flagpole turned again and entangled with the light beam. Across the void, they began to exchange countless mysterious moves. The flagpole of the Era flag displayed the endless mysteries of the martial arts that Luo Fan had mastered in the void. The flagpole was like a long staff, drawing a mysterious trajectory and swaying a large number of staff shadows to shroud the creator. The light beam displayed by the creator wasn't at a disadvantage at all. The light beam constantly rotated in the void like a long whip, protecting him tightly. No matter how mysterious the flagpole was, it couldn't break through the obstruction and step within 1 foot of the creator's body. What Luo Fan displayed was the profound mysteries of the martial arts. Although what the creator displayed wasn't a martial art, it was also a supreme battle technique that he had summed up through countless battles. Its subtlety wasn't inferior to the mysteries of the martial arts. The battle between the two could be said to be evenly matched. The battle caused the entire battlefield world to tremble endlessly. Countless light spots fell densely and turned into meteorites of various sizes. They bombarded the ground of the battlefield world, making it seem like doomsday had arrived. In the aftermath of such a battle, how could the experts in the battlefield world still have the mood to pay attention to the battle between Luo Fan and the creator? Everyone was panicking and constantly dodged the falling meteorites. They were only worried that if they couldn't dodge in time, they would die and their souls would scatter. Chapter 964. The power of the divine ability of a great perfection quasi-sage was extremely astonishing. Every move had the power to destroy space and collapse the universe. The disk that appeared in his palm was constantly flashing, and the beam of light that the disk emitted was constantly changing in all sorts of mysterious postures and characteristics. No matter how exquisite Luo Fan's martial arts were, he couldn't suppress it, and he couldn't pass through the barrier of the beam of light to attack Luo Fan. His beam of light on the other hand, was the exact opposite. Instead, it was constantly looking for all kinds of almost impossible opportunities to attack Luo Fan. Fortunately, Luo Fan's attainments in martial arts were extremely profound. Therefore, he was able to make use of the changes in his body to prevent the light beam from truly hitting him. As a result, his body and mind were intact, and he did not suffer any injuries. The creator did not use any other techniques. He only relied on the exquisite combat techniques that he had accumulated through countless battles to fight against Luo Fan. In the void, he moved his body, and the illusory disc in his hand constantly expanded and contracted. All sorts of mysterious and complicated runes on the disc were constantly moving in an extremely subtle manner. During this process, the entire dream world seemed to be constantly absorbing the essence of an unimaginable existence. From time to time, it would contract. If it was a living creature, it would be extremely painful. The creator looked extremely delighted at this moment. The light in his eyes was incomparably scorching. It seemed like his entire body and mind were immersed in an indescribably carefree state. Unlike him, Luo Fan was frowning deeply at this time. His every move was in accordance with the profound mysteries of martial arts. Every attack had the power to shatter space and time. He had unleashed his martial arts attainments to the limit. However, no matter how hard he tried, he could not defeat the creator. How could he relax? More importantly, the expression on the creator's face was clearly one of enjoyment. It was obvious that he had not unleashed his full strength. As the two of them battled in the void, the shockwaves of their battle not only affected the entire battlefield world, but even beyond the battlefield world, the unknown number of worlds above the world pyramid, causing all sorts of phenomena to appear in the battlefield world. There were also violent tremors and countless meteorites falling from the sky. However, these meteorites were not as big as the ones in the battlefield world. As these changes occurred, the many living creatures in the battlefield world who were participating in the bloody battle were all horrified. They looked at each other in bewilderment, wondering what exactly was happening. Was this the end of the world or something like that? This process lasted for a year. Luo Fan's martial arts attainments were profound enough for him to continuously unleash all kinds of exquisite martial arts without repetition for thousands of years. The battle techniques that the creator mastered also allowed him to use various battle techniques without repetition in battle. Under such circumstances, it was not inconceivable for the two of them to battle for a year. After a year of battle, the expressions of Luo Fan and the creator had changed a lot. The creator had completely ignored everything at this moment. The fighting spirit in his eyes was so strong that even the weakest person would be filled with endless fighting spirit after seeing it. As for Luo Fan, he had completely thrown everything else aside from the battle to the back of his mind. What would happen if he could not defeat the person in front of him? What method should he use to defeat the opponent if he could not deal with the opponent? All of these had completely disappeared at some point in time. At this moment, his entire body and mind were focused on the countless martial arts he had executed. In his eyes, there was only an endless will to fight, only the will to fight that filled the sky. His figure had almost completely fused with the era flag. When the flagpole was unfurled, a sea of flagpoles swung out, covering the sky and covering the earth, almost covering the entire sky. The flag of the era had completely shrunk at some point in time. Although it was entangled by countless world chains and could not move, it had almost shrunk to the point that it was almost non-existent. It was as if the flagpole was an afterimage around the flagpole. During this year, he felt that the flag could not play any role at all. Hence, he completely retracted its power and transferred almost all of its power to the flagpole. This greatly enhanced the power of the flagpole and reduced the drag brought by the expansion of the flag. However, the creator still entangled the world chains on the flag. Obviously, he was not at ease. Or rather, he did not believe that Luo Fan would completely let go of his vigilance against the flag. He did not think that Luo Fan would still not use the flag after he removed the world chains from the flag. However, his worry was right. Without the world chains locking onto him, Luo Fan would have long opened a long river on the flag and directly absorbed the creator into the universe inside the flag. In that case, even if he was the creator of this dream world, he could only become a fish on the chopping board. No matter what methods Luo Fan used, even if he could drag it out for a long time, he would still be defeated by Luo Fan in the end. At this moment, Luo Fan's mind and intent had entered a thoughtless state. His body naturally generated his own fighting will and naturally integrated all the power in his body to exert a strength that was far beyond his usual state. This made his transcendence intent rise unknowingly. Luo Fan's cultivation realm was at the Tao integration perfection realm. As for the creator, even without the help of the power of this dream world, his cultivation realm had reached the great accomplishment of the Sage-to-Be realm, which was equivalent to the Transcendence realm. Compared to Luo Fan, such a realm was only a small realm higher. However, that small realm was a small realm higher than the big realm. The gap between them was almost 10,000 times. With such a disparity in strength, the two of them were equally matched. Although Luo Fan was at a slight disadvantage, it was still many times better than the difference in strength between the two of them. The reason for this was very simple. The era flag that Luo Fan had exerted contained traces of the era trend's mysteries. These traces of profoundness allowed Luo Fan to display a strength that far exceeded his own. Thus, he could turn the impossible into the possible, allowing him to have the strength to contend with a great perfection quasi-sage. Such a battle could be said to be a battle of a realm higher than Luo Fan's current realm. It was a battle of the Transcendence realm. To him, such a battle was extremely beneficial. The longer the battle continued, the clearer he understood the secrets of the Transcendent realm. It allowed him to understand the truth of the Transcendent realm more and more, allowing him to get closer and closer to the Transcendent realm. At this moment, he was in a thoughtless state. He was using his body and his instinct to perceive the secrets of the Transcendence realm. Compared to his usual state, the efficiency of this state was more than 100 times higher. In other words, if he were to stay in this state, he would only need to spend 1% of his usual time to complete the process of entering the Transcendence realm. It was unknown whether or not the creator of the universe had sensed the change in Luo Fan. At this time, he did not have the slightest intention of changing his methods. He was still using his battle techniques to fight against Luo Fan, exchanging moves with Luo Fan, constantly oppressing Luo Fan, and constantly forcing him to use stronger and more exquisite methods. One should know that he was a great accomplishment Sage-to-Be and the supreme creator in the dream realm. Even if Luo Fan's era flag had cut off his connection with the dream realm, it was impossible for such an existence to possess such techniques. Of course, the reason why he only displayed such techniques at this moment was intentional. Perhaps he was simply enjoying the fun of the battle. Or perhaps he was happy to see Luo Fan's improvement in strength and wanted to increase Luo Fan's strength as much as possible so that Luo Fan could pose as much threat to him as possible, allowing him to bring as many intense battles as possible to him. No matter what the reason was, it wasn't important to Luo Fan. At this moment, what was more important to Luo Fan was to continuously comprehend the mysteries of the Transcendence realm and the true principles within. He wanted to improve his cultivation realm as much as possible and eventually achieve a breakthrough. In just 1 year, the entire battlefield world had been reduced to ruins. Almost every inch of land and every inch of the ocean was filled with those strange meteorites. Only a few lives were left in the entire battlefield. They were all extremely lucky and powerful beings. They were also the powerhouses who looked at the battlefield between Luo Fan and the creator with anticipation. However, at this moment, the gazes that these beings looked at Luo Fan and the creator were no longer filled with anticipation and anxiety. Instead, they were filled with hatred and fear. Needless to say, hatred was needless to say. They had lived in this battlefield for countless years and naturally had countless relatives and friends. However, all of their relatives and friends had died in the aftermath of the battle in the past year. Under such circumstances, how could they possibly look forward to the battle? Naturally, they were filled with hatred. As for fear, it was needless to say. The aftermath of the battle had almost turned the entire world into ruins. Moreover, it was a battle that took place in the boundlessly high sky. If they were any closer to such a battle, they might have already perished and their souls scattered. How could they not be afraid? Since this battlefield was in such a state, the situation in the previous 8 battlefields beneath the world pyramid wasn't any better. Although the crimson and dusky meteorites that fell from those worlds were much smaller than those in this battlefield world, their numbers were many times greater. After the battle in the past year, the countless beings in the battlefield worlds had already been completely annihilated in the endless meteorites. In fact, more than half of the worlds had directly exploded due to the aftermath of the battle, and the entire battlefield world had disappeared from the world pyramid. The disappearance of these worlds caused the structure of the pyramid to become incomplete and unstable. The entire pyramid was on the verge of collapse, as if it could collapse and be destroyed at any time. This world pyramid was only a small part of the entire dream world, and it was a very, very small part at that. Outside the world pyramid, in another indescribable void, there was another world. It was an extremely vast world with a round sky and a square earth, and it was filled with countless beings. This world was so vast that it was tens of thousands of times larger than the countless worlds above the world pyramid combined. Such a world had also suffered great damage in the battle between Luo Fan and the Creator. However, such a world was extremely far away from where the two of them had fought, and it was just too vast. Hence, the damage it suffered was countless times smaller than the worlds above the world pyramid. However, there were meteor showers falling from the sky from time to time, and from time to time, a certain province or a certain place would be hit by a meteor, causing a great deal of damage. There were also rumors of someone being extremely lucky and obtaining some kind of treasure from the meteor, allowing them to soar into the sky. In comparison, the countless meteorites were more beneficial than detrimental to them. No matter how hard they worked and how high their aptitudes were, they could only cultivate to be dozens of times stronger than ordinary people. Hence, they were able to obtain opportunities from the meteorites that surpassed their limits, allowing them to obtain strength that was dozens of times stronger than ordinary people. The reason for this was also very simple. In fact, these meteorites were not real meteorites, but objects formed by the power of Luo Fan and the Creator. Whether it was the Creator or Luo Fan, they were both existences that surpassed the limits of this dream world. In other words, the rules and laws of this dream world could not restrict their power and abilities at all. Under such circumstances, their power naturally contained such characteristics. The meteorites formed from their powers weren't exactly the same. Instead, they were all different. Although most of them were just simple meteorites, there were many meteorites that contained a trace of Luo Fan's martial arts or the mysteries of the Creator's battle techniques. These meteorites naturally evolved into all kinds of strange things, but as long as a living being could obtain them, they could rely on them to break through some of the restrictions of the dream realm. From there, their strength would increase to a level that the dream realm didn't allow. They would surpass their original limits and increase their strength to a realm that was dozens of times greater than that of an ordinary person. As for how much their power could be raised to, it depended on what they obtained and how many mysteries of martial arts or battle techniques it contained. Some were lucky enough to obtain the mysteries contained in the objects that were beyond imagination. They could even raise their cultivation realm to more than 10,000 times that of ordinary people. This was already the power that could only be obtained after passing through 2 or 3 rounds of bloody battles. Precisely because of this situation, the living beings in this vast world were not knowledgeable enough to know the root cause of the meteorite's appearance. Instead, they were exceptionally welcoming of such changes. They even wished that the number of meteorites falling from the sky would increase by countless times, or even bury the entire world. This was bad luck for the living beings in the battlefield world, but for the living beings in this vast world, it was good luck. Time passed just like that. Unknowingly, 100 years had passed. In these 100 years, the battle between Luo Fan and the Creator had continued. The aftermath of their battle did not decrease because of the passage of time. Instead, it became more and more intense. After 100 years of devastation, the world pyramid had completely collapsed. All the worlds in the world pyramid, except for the largest battlefield world at the top of the pyramid, which was preserved because it was shrouded by Luo Fan's era flag. All the other worlds had been completely destroyed. The entire world pyramid was left with only one lonely world existing in the boundless void. The world pyramid only existed in name, and it had long ceased to exist. It was to the extent that even though the only remaining battlefield world was protected by Luo Fan's era flag, it had already become riddled with holes. The entire world had become completely silent. The few experts that were still alive had already completely disappeared. There were no living beings in the entire world. Because there were simply too many meteorites piled up in this world, some inexplicable changes had unknowingly occurred. Because the piled meteorites collided with each other, they turned back into specks of power and continued to fight fiercely in this world. They even evolved into thousands of armies that ran back and forth in this world, fighting and fighting in another way, extending the battle between Luo Fan and the Creator. Because of this, although the entire world had lost all living beings, it seemed to still be lively, as if it had not lost its vitality. Such changes were truly mysterious. Looking down from the void, one could see that the entire world was shrouded in a strange fog. Within the fog, there were gray and bright red armies fighting with no regard for their lives. Countless sounds of battle rose into the sky, and smoke billowed faintly, naturally emitting a cruel and bloody aura. The world pyramid had undergone such a drastic change, but the wider world outside the world pyramid had also undergone great changes. At this moment, the entire world had undergone earth-shattering changes. The overall cultivation level of that world had greatly improved. At this moment, the average expert in the entire world was at least 100 times more powerful than an ordinary person. And the strongest expert was 1,000,000 times more powerful than an ordinary person. They were already much stronger than before. Such an improvement was obviously because the number of strange meteorites that had fallen from the sky over the past 100 years had increased to an unbelievable level. As a result, the strange things obtained from the meteorites had become rampant. However, even though the meteorites had greatly improved the cultivation level of the entire world, none of the living beings in this world were grateful to these meteorites. None of them expected the meteorites to become more numerous. Chapter 965. The reason why the living beings in this world no longer looked forward to it and no longer thanked it was simple. It was because the meteorites that fell from the sky over the past 100 years had brought harm to them to a point where even the most deranged living beings would feel shocked and unable to bear it. Over the past 100 years, the world with the most living beings in Dreamscape had not been destroyed by the aftermath of the battle, but more than half of it had been reduced to ruins. More than 30% of the living beings in the world had died because of it. Such a number, placed in such a huge world, represented an unknown number of trillions of living beings. This was enough to make any deranged person worry whether the entire world would be destroyed in the end. They were worried that even if they obtained boundless power, they would eventually die because of this misfortune. Under such circumstances, would they still be thankful for the changes that the meteorites had brought to them? Would they still be looking forward to more meteorites falling? If the Creator had paid even the slightest attention to such changes, he would definitely have countless methods to prevent the situation from developing to such a serious state. However, it was clear that although the Creator still had the strength to spare and could easily pay attention to all of this, he did not care about it at all. He did not care about the shocking damage that his battle with Luo Fan would bring to the entire Dreamscape, nor did he care about how many worlds would be destroyed because of their battle. In his eyes, in his heart, there was only Luo Fan in front of him. There was only this battle that he could enjoy to his heart's content ever since he created this Dreamscape. Although stopping the destruction of the world was as easy as lifting a finger for him, and it did not even affect his battle at all. He was unwilling to do it just because it would slightly affect his enjoyment of the battle. It was as if everything in this world could not compare to the slight sense of satisfaction in his heart. Even the creator, who had created the entire dreamscape, did not care about the living beings here at all, let alone Luo Fan, who could not split a single bit of his heart and had nothing to do with the living beings in this dreamscape. Not to mention that he did not realize that the aftermath of the battle would have such an effect. Even if he did, he would just pretend that he did not feel it. He would not change his actions because of this. As time passed, the transcendence intent contained in Luo Fan's aura became more and more obvious. In the end, it almost solidified, transforming into true transcendence. However, it was only almost. When this transcendence was almost completely formed, in that instant, the aura of a transcendent being was released. It was as if a dam had suddenly appeared in front of him, causing his aura, which had been growing at every moment, to suddenly stagnate. It was as if he had hit an unshakable dam. He completely stopped, and a feeling of powerlessness spread out. Anyone who sensed this aura would realize that although this aura was powerful, it was impossible for them to advance any further. This change naturally woke up Luo Fan from his thoughtless state. After he woke up from that state, he realized, in the depths of his heart, he could faintly see a shackle that was countless times stronger and harder than the one he had endured since he stepped into this dream world. This shackle was tightly binding him, preventing him from stepping into a completely new and different realm. Is this the transcendent existence required to reach the transcendent realm? In an instant, such a thought appeared in Luo Fan's mind. This shackle was so thick and heavy. It was so sturdy, so hard, and so huge that it gave him the feeling that he would never be able to break through it. Behind this shackle was boundless freedom and carefreeness. Even though he had never seen such a shackle before, he understood that this shackle was the shackle that prevented him from truly reaching the transcendent realm. It was the real reason why he could not transcend. In other words, as long as he broke this shackle, he would obtain boundless freedom and carefreeness and become a true transcendent being. However, this shackle was extremely strong. It was many times stronger than the shackle of the world. Even though he was in an unprecedentedly good state, he was still so insignificant and powerless in front of this shackle. It was impossible for him to break this shackle and become a transcendent being. So that's how it is. No wonder so many barriers were set up to help me break through this bottleneck. Luo Fan sighed. His mind returned to his body, and he slowly opened his eyes. At this moment, although he could not break the shackle and could not truly step into the transcendent realm, he had already reached the end of the Tao integration realm. Everything about the Tao integration realm was no longer a secret to him. Moreover, the transcendent intent on his body was extremely dense. It was obvious that he had barely touched the threshold of the transcendent realm. It would be an exaggeration to say that he was half-step into the transcendent realm, but he was no longer a Tao integration expert. This change made his current strength more than 100 times stronger than it was 100 years ago. His body floated in the void. With a slight thought, a long river of unknown origin and unknown destination appeared above his head out of thin air. Although the long river stretched across his head and seemed extremely clear, allowing people to see every line, upon closer inspection, they would find that there was a huge mistake in their previous impression of it. After changing their impression and observing it again, they would find that there were almost the same number of mistakes after the modification. This cycle repeated endlessly. This was the illusion of the long river of the Great Path. At this moment, the illusion of the long river of the Great Path looked extremely complete and perfect. It seemed to be able to completely replace the Great Path in the dark. It possessed infinite unimaginable power and contained infinite divine might. The long river floated there. With a slight tremble, the only surviving battlefield world in the entire world pyramid shook violently. Originally, Luo Fan couldn't completely cut off the connection even with the help of the era flag. The connection between the creator and the dream world was instantly cut off. The creator even felt like he had become an ant and had stepped into the world of the other creator. The creator, was the one in front of him that he had created. Previously, he had thought that the creator only had some ability but was not enough to pose a threat to him. This discovery made the creator's expression change drastically. His mind was filled with thoughts that were impossible, absolutely impossible. And how could such a thing happen? As the creator, he had opened up such a vast and boundless world. Although he did not know that this world was his dream, this world belonged to him. In this world, he was omnipotent and supreme. There was no doubt that he could treat everything as ants. In the countless years before this, no matter how much he hoped that someone else could defeat him, he hoped that someone else could become the new creator. He still had boundless pride in his heart, and he had absolute confidence in himself. That pride and confidence made him think that even if there was a living being that could defeat him, it would have to be him handing over the position of the creator to that living being. Only then could he become the creator. This mentality was similar to the mentality of the emperor of a secular empire. What I give you is yours. If I didn't give it to you, you can't reach out and take it. It was with this mentality that the royal families of those secular empires had. Father killing son, son killing father, elder brother killing younger brother killing elder brother, mother killing son, son killing mother, and so on were common occurrences. They happened almost all the time. At this moment, this was the mentality of the creator. His heart was filled with boundless anger. The unyielding fighting spirit in his eyes had already disappeared without a trace, and what replaced it was boundless killing intent. Since you dare to do this, it seems like I can't let you live, the creator said softly. In the past, his killing intent could make the world turn upside down. However, it could cause the world to flip and the entire dreamscape to instantly wail and howl, causing all living beings in the world to feel boundless fear. However, at this moment, because Luo Fan had replaced him as the controller of this battlefield world, he had such killing intent. His killing intent only made the entire world feel slightly oppressed, and there were no signs at all. The creator felt this change, and the killing intent in his heart intensified. With a thought, the disc in his hand turned and disappeared without a trace. Then, he opened his right hand and covered Luo Fan. In an instant, the entire battlefield world seemed to be locked by an extremely powerful force. Time, space, matter, energy, rules, and everything else were making cracking sound in the process. It seemed like they could collapse and turn into nothingness at any time because of this terrifying force. Under such circumstances, even Luo Fan felt that his body could not move at all. The power in his body, his spirit, his will, his perception, his state of mind, and so on, everything that belonged to him seemed to have been frozen. It was almost impossible for him to even move a little. If he was still in the same state as before, only using the era flag to increase his authority in this battlefield world, the changes at this moment would be enough to turn him into a fish on the chopping board, allowing the other party to do whatever they wanted. However, at this moment, he condensed the phantom of the Great Path River and directly used the power of the phantom to control the entire battlefield world, becoming the creator of this battlefield world in terms of authority. The situation was completely different from before, and the situation had long been reversed. The changes in front of him could be done with just a thought. Thus, his heart was moved. In an instant, the long river above his head trembled slightly, and the entire battlefield world also trembled slightly. With this tremble, the various abnormalities caused by the creator's raising of his hand completely disappeared in an instant. Luo Fan immediately felt relaxed. Everything around him was smooth and unhindered, and the speed of his movement reached its peak. The various abnormalities before were only the special effects of the creator's raising of his hand, but they were not the full power of the raising of his hand. Therefore, although such changes have been dispelled, the creator only frowned and did not stop moving. He still raised his hand and covered Luo Fan. In this process, the phantom of a huge hand appeared out of nowhere, directly covering Luo Fan and directly grabbing towards Luo Fan. This grab covered countless space-time, sealing off all the directions and possibilities that Luo Fan could dodge, so that Luo Fan could only rely on his own strength to resist. This was clearly the true magic of a great accomplishment quasi-sage. It was not something that the exquisite battle techniques that had entangled Luo Fan for 100 years could compare to. Luo Fan lifted his hand and pointed. The era flag that he had been using for over 100 years shook, and the chains of the world that were attached to the era flag were instantly shattered. The era flag of that era's flag instantly turned into a long river. It extended infinitely upwards, and, in an instant, it collided with the phantom of the huge hand. The phantom of the huge hand was extremely terrifying. Although it did not have the ability to shatter space-time, it was unimaginably powerful. As a result, space-time was surpassed before it could shatter. The phantom of the huge hand collided with the era flag of that era's flag. This caused the era flag of that era's flag to stagnate. Even the power that formed the flag dissipated slightly, as if it was about to collapse and disappear. However, the phantom of the huge hand did not tremble at all. It continued to press down at a speed that was as fast as it could. It did not stop at all and continued to press down on Luo Fan in an unstoppable manner, intending to destroy him completely. Luo Fan frowned, shocked by the power of the huge hand. However, he did not despair. The creator could not change the fact that he had used the phantom of the Great Path River to control this battlefield world. This meant that no matter how strong the creator's technique was, it would still be greatly reduced. With a slight thought from Luo Fan, the power of the entire battlefield world gathered in an instant, forming a phantom in front of the era flag of that era's long river. In an instant, the long river on the flag stabilized, and thus resisted the huge hand. Although the huge hand continued to press down, it still could not break the long river, nor could it make the long river dissipate. In this way, the huge hand was naturally blocked by the long river. Although it continued to press down, and there were still countless cracking sounds, it could not go any further. The creator's eyebrows twitched, and the anger on his face intensified. At this very moment, because the power of the entire battlefield world had been diverted by Luo Fan to protect the long river on the flag, the entire battlefield world was cracking under the pressure of the creator's huge hand. Cracks appeared in every inch of the void from time to time. It was as if the entire world was on the verge of collapsing because of this pressure and could collapse at any time. Based on the performance of the battlefield world, if this continued, it would not be long before the entire world completely collapsed and shattered. After all, the creator was a great completion quasi-saint, an existence that was equivalent to a transcendent being. How could his power be resisted by an entire world? It was already extremely rare for it to be able to stop him for even a moment. How could it last for a long time? However, this was all that Luo Fan needed. Although the river on the flag possessed boundless might when used as a direct attack, its greatest power wasn't a direct attack. Its true power came from the mysterious universe contained within it. The moment the flag used the power of the battlefield world to block the huge hand, it shrunk slightly, and with another turn, it had already bypassed the huge hand. In an instant, as if it did not need to pass through time and space, it directly appeared on the body of the creator and wrapped around the creator. The power of the creator's mystique was unfathomable. Originally, with the rotation of the long river on the flag, even if it had transcended time and space, it should not have been able to wrap around the creator. However, this world had already been controlled by the long river of the great path that Luo Fan had materialized. In the process, he had slightly changed the rules of this world, and before the creator could react, he had already been wrapped within it. The creator's heart trembled, and a thought flashed through his mind. Then, he realized that he had already appeared in the void of another strange universe due to the irresistible space-time shift. All connections between him and the world he had created, including the battlefield world that the creator had transferred to his opponent, had completely disappeared. It was as if they had never existed. Then, the void shimmered, and one figure after another appeared around him. These figures came in all shapes and sizes, and each of them had the power of the challenger that the creator had fought for over 100 years. They floated densely in all directions, and the auras they emitted intertwined, forming a pressure that could freeze the heavens and earth. Even the creator felt greatly affected. In the battlefield world, the long river on the flag of the era had already shrunk, turning into an ordinary flag. On the flag, the creator's figure floated in the center, looking irritated and furious, and his eyes were filled with boundless killing intent. The giant hand shadow that the creator had previously released had now collapsed into countless forces, dissipating towards the entire battlefield world. Having lost connection with the creator, this force naturally lost its imprint of control and became a pure, condensed force. As such a condensed force was the power of a great accomplishment sage to be, if there was no external influence, it could even develop sentience and become a force-living being. However, at this moment, the force of the entire world was bombarding it, so it was impossible for such a thing to happen. Of course, it was directly smashed into countless power powders. Such a change contained too much power, and so the vitality of the entire battlefield world seemed to have increased. Chapter 966. At this moment, although the creator was still alive, he had already fallen into the mysterious universe created by the flag of the era. This naturally meant that the outcome was already decided, and he would no longer have a chance to make a comeback. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan could naturally relax completely and say that he had successfully defeated the creator. In that mysterious universe, the creator was enduring endless attacks at all times. The life forms condensed from each of those universes weren't any weaker than Luo Fan. Moreover, they could be reborn as soon as they were destroyed. No matter how many of them were destroyed, they could still recover in an instant. In this way, even if the creator was a great accomplishment quasi-saint and possessed incredible abilities that allowed him to destroy millions of such living beings in a single breath, he would still be defeated by them in the end. Luo Fan sat cross-legged in the battlefield world. The illusion of the great path river above his head shook slightly and gradually became blurry. In the end, it disappeared without a trace. With the disappearance of the great path river, the feeling that the entire battlefield world was under his control completely disappeared. The entire battlefield world seemed to be under the control of the creator again. However, the creator had already been included in the universe within the flag of the era. Even if the battlefield world had returned to normal, he could not control it. His connection with the battlefield world was still completely severed, and it did not benefit his current state at all. The battlefield world was filled with the residual power of the battle between Luo Fan and the creator of the universe for more than 100 years. During this process, it was still constantly killing each other, evolving into an endless army, and countless warriors were fighting crazily. However, the battle and the evolution were getting weaker and smaller. Although it would still take a long time for it to finally stop, it would definitely stop. Clearly, it had become water without a source and a tree without roots. Except for the battlefield world. In the extremely vast world of the dream world, the countless meteors that fell from the sky all the time had also stopped. Such a change was simply astounding to all the living beings in that world, and it caused them to simply wonder if they were dreaming. Some conspiracy theorists even suspected that this was the calm before the storm. What was coming next would be even more tragic and shocking changes than what they had experienced in the past 100 years. In fact, they were not wrong to think so. The entire dreamscape was about to be destroyed. Wouldn't that be an even more tragic change? Luo Fan floated in the world of the battlefield. Above his head was the era flag that seemed to be floating and undulating. The figure of the creator could be seen clearly on the flag. It was as though he was executing all sorts of incredible techniques, displaying the supreme might of a great accomplishment quasi-sage. Luo Fan did not pay much attention to the various things in the universe. He simply allowed the universe to evolve naturally, allowing the power of the universe to fight against the creator. Even if he were to join in, it would ultimately shorten the duration of the battle, but regardless of whether he joined in or not, he would still emerge victorious in the end. So what was the point of doing something unnecessary? He wasn't short of time. What he was doing as he floated, there was comprehending the changes in his body and mind, as well as the gains he had gained from fighting against the Creator over the past 100 years. His cultivation realm had increased by leaps and bounds compared to before. Although he had yet to step into the transcendent realm, he could be considered to have surpassed the convergence realm. His entire body was filled with a transcendent aura. If the shackles that restricted his cultivation realm were disregarded, his current performance was already not that different from Transcendent Expert. In other words, he could already be considered a pseudo-transcendent expert. In other words, he could now be considered a pseudo-transcendent expert. Compared to a true transcendent expert, he was only lacking in breaking through the shackles. It's a pity. That shackle was simply too strong. If he wanted to break that shackle, he would have to do so. The difficulty of breaking through them is unimaginable. Becoming a true transcendent expert is still far off in the foreseeable future. Luo Fan sighed. With just a single thought, he could feel that the power in his body was vast and boundless. Almost any point of it could evolve into a complete universe. He only needed to expend a little bit of power to instantly destroy this battlefield world. His vision was also much stronger than before. But all of this seemed so fake. It was like a castle erected on the beach. If anyone were to hit it lightly, it would be reduced to nothing. This feeling made him feel both wonderful and helpless. At this moment, his cultivation realm had fallen into what could be said to be the biggest and strongest bottleneck he had ever encountered in his life. Before this bottleneck, all the bottlenecks he had experienced in the past were like children playing house. They were simply not enough. In fact, this bottleneck was reduced by hundreds or thousands of times, and it was countless times stronger than the bottlenecks he had encountered in the past. Because of the existence of this bottleneck, it was impossible for his cultivation realm to improve any further unless he completely broke through it. From this, it could be imagined that if he wanted to improve his cultivation realm, it would probably take quite a long time. Therefore, what he wanted to do at this moment was to start comprehending his various divine arts and various methods to fight his enemies so that he could unleash even greater power with the same level of cultivation so that he could face the challenges that were getting more and more difficult. As a transcendent expert, the further he went, the more difficult it would be to advance. At this moment, he had passed through this dream world. There were still 6 more challenges waiting for him. If these 6 challenges were all dream worlds, then the living beings in these 6 dream worlds would at least be at the great accomplishment quasi-sage realm. Only then would these 6 challenges pose enough pressure for him to finally break through and become a true transcendent expert. Great accomplishment quasi-sage realm existences, even the weakest of them, will be able to crush Luo Fan in terms of pure power. Even if Luo Fan had the support of the mysteries of the times, it would not be easy to defeat them. In fact, whether he could succeed or not depended largely on luck. Under such circumstances, the challenges that Luo Fan had to accept next could cause him to die without a burial ground. His billions of years of cultivation would be destroyed in a single day. How could he not be cautious? How could he not try his best to use all his mysteries and perfect his magical abilities so that he could exert greater power with the same cultivation realm? The entire world above the battlefield fell into a state of silence. Time passed quickly. 10,000 years passed in the blink of an eye. During these 10,000 years, the entire world of battlefield had gradually calmed down. Above the world of battlefield, Luo Fan sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. A bright red flag floated above his head. On the surface of the bright red flag, there was a figure moving around in a lively manner. However, compared to 10,000 years ago, this figure was in a much worse state. His body was in tatters, and his aura was fluctuating. It seemed like he could collapse at any time. Moreover, the expression on his face was filled with endless annoyance, and there was a faint sense of despair mixed within. On this day, Luo Fan, whose eyes had been closed for 10,000 years, suddenly opened his eyes. In an instant, two bright red lights flashed in the depths of his eyes. The entire world of Battlefield was instantly shrouded in a bright red light. Under this bright red light, the countless armies and warriors that had evolved from the power at the bottom of the world of Battlefield suddenly paused. Then, all the armies and warriors collapsed at the same time. The whole process was extremely natural, as if these armies and warriors were just piled up with sand. There was not even any explosion during the process of collapse. These armies and warriors collapsed into free energy that gradually dispersed and merged with the Yuan Qi in the void, causing the Yuan Qi of the world of Battlefield to gradually increase. Judging from the speed of the Yuan Qi increase, if this world of Battlefield could survive in the future, it would definitely be an extremely rare treasure trove of life that could give birth to an extremely large number and extremely rich variety of life. It might even become a holy land for cultivation. But obviously, this was just wishful thinking. No matter how much this world of Battlefield had been changed by Luo Fan's divine ability, it was only a part of a dream. As long as the dreamer woke up, this world would naturally collapse. Luo Fan's eyes turned slightly. The bright red light disappeared in an instant. The entire world of Battlefield returned to normal. Of course, the armies and warriors that had collapsed and disappeared naturally could not be condensed again. He moved his mind. A bright red river that existed in his mind appeared outside his body and instantly overlapped with the flag of the era above his head. Then, tens of millions of different kinds of power were evolved from the power source in his body. They rushed out of his body and fused into the bright red river floating above his head. At the same time, as the tens of millions of kinds of power merged with the bright red river, there was also the flag of the era that had made countless contributions and allowed him to defeat who knows how many opponents. At this moment, the flag looked like ice and snow meeting the sun, constantly melting, as if it was being crushed and carried away by the bright red river bit by bit like an ordinary river carrying away sand. With this change, the bright red river became more and more real. It gradually revealed a supreme, irresistible, and all-controlling aura. It was as if the entire world, the universe, and even the great Tao could not escape its control and were about to be overridden by it. This aura grew to the extreme the moment the entire flag and all the power that Luo Fan had released completely merged with it. And the universe within the flag of the era seemed to have become a wave on the bright red river, a drop of water. The creator, who was originally almost omnipotent, seemed to be in the wave, struggling to survive within the drop of water. With a slight thought from Luo Fan, the bright red river turned slightly, its curved shape changing slightly, and the entire world of Battlefield underwent an earth-shattering change. In an instant, the world flipped, and everything that originally existed in the world of Battlefield was completely mixed together in an instant, forming a gray mass that seemed like a creation in a state of chaos. After this object was formed, it exploded in an instant, as if it was splitting the heavens and the earth, directly forming a boundless universe. This universe was so vast that at first glance, it seemed to be no different from the universe on Earth. There were also countless galaxies, countless formations, and countless planets. One could even faintly see waves of vitality being born, growing, declining, and dying in this huge universe. The entire universe seemed so real, and it was impossible to tell that it was completely different from before. And above this universe, Luo Fan and the bright red river were above it in an extremely mysterious way. The long river was suppressing this universe in an extremely unbelievable way, as if everything in the entire universe corresponded to this long river and was completely controlled by this long river. This universe was constantly expanding, and the speed at which it was expanding was many times faster than the speed at which an ordinary universe expanded. In just a few breaths' time, it had gone through the process of the real universe for 5-6 billion years. After a few breaths' time, when this universe expanded to 100 times larger than when it was first created, the long river turned again, and the entire universe suddenly shrank. In just a few breaths' time, it shrank back to the original gray mass. It seemed to be in a state of chaos, but it was far from a strange product that was in a state of chaos. After that, it was another round of splitting the heavens and the earth. A brand new universe was born, expanded, and shrank. Destruction. Just like that, the cycle of creation and destruction of universes continued under the changes of the long river. Thus, countless mysterious universes were continuously created by Luo Fan. Most of these universes looked like the universe on Earth, but there were also quite a number of them that had a round sky and a square Earth. They looked like the Primordial world and the Great Tianyuan world. Moreover, even universes that looked like the universe on Earth were vastly different from each other. The auras in those universes were all different, strange, and had their own characteristics. All of them had their own mysteries. This cycle continued for billions of times. When each cycle was compressed to an instant, Luo Fan let out a long breath and stopped the evolution cycle of the universe's creation and destruction. I finally gained complete control over it. Fortunately, it's condensed from my own power. Otherwise, it would have taken thousands of times longer to complete. Luo Fan let out a long breath, and a satisfied smile appeared on his face. The bright red river above his head trembled slightly, and a world with a round sky and square earth appeared in front of him. This world looked exactly the same as the battlefield he first stepped into, and even the auras of the living beings in it were also exactly the same as back then. It was exactly the same as back then. It was as if time had reversed, creating life. It was a simple matter for ordinary Khanate Grand Luo realm cultivators, let alone Luo Fan, who had just achieved the immortal Tao and had begun to create humans. It was just a matter of a thought for him to recreate the living beings that once existed according to the imprint left behind in this dreamscape. Coupled with the power of the bright red river above his head that could even create and destroy universes at will, he didn't need to waste a single bit of his energy to create these countless living beings. Naturally, Luo Fan didn't care how surprised and confused the living beings who had completely lost sight of the effects of the battle between Luo Fan and the Creator were. Instead, he turned his gaze to a wave in the bright red river. Within the wave, a battered and exhausted figure was frantically resisting some kind of attack. He seemed to have drawn out the power of his spirit to fight against the enemy, and even his life force was almost depleted. That person was the creator of this dream world, as well as the great completion quasi-saint that Luo Fan needed to defeat. He was already at the end of his rope. Even if Luo Fan didn't care about him, he wouldn't be able to hold on for much longer. I didn't expect him to still have such power after enduring for 10,000 years. This person is much stronger than the previous master of this dream world. Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh emotionally when he sensed the power of the great completion quasi-saint. Who are you? You are definitely not my creation. The great completion quasi-saint suddenly roared, his voice filled with anger and doubt. I admire your heroism, so I can answer this question, Luo Fan sighed. The bright red long river above his head was something he comprehended based on his current cultivation realm after he had improved. In this realm, he could perfectly unleash the power combination of his tide of the era's power. Based on the fact that the river had been able to melt the era flag, it was clear that the power of the era-long river was much stronger than that of the era flag. Furthermore, it wasn't just 1 or 2 times stronger, but 1,000 times stronger. It could be said that this bright red river was a long river of the era, and it was even closer to the era tide than the flag of that era. Such a mysterious long river of the era was almost omnipotent. It was naturally easy to transmit Luo Fan's voice to the Creator. Therefore, as soon as he finished speaking, The great completion quasi-saint suddenly trembled and shouted, "Who are you? You know that you're the creator of this world, but do you know where you were before you created this world and what kind of existence you were?" Luo Fan sighed. When the great completion quasi-saint heard Luo Fan's words, he couldn't help but be stunned. An ever-changing expression appeared on his face. The way he changed was so complicated that it couldn't be described with words. Clearly, he was seriously thinking about Luo Fan's question. While he was thinking, Luo Fan cooperatively stopped the endless attacks of the long river of the era and waited for the great completion quasi-saint to think it through. As for whether he was deliberately putting on a thoughtful look to delay time so that he could have time to restore his strength, this was not important to Luo Fan at all. The power of the River of Time was thousands of times stronger than that of the Banner of Time. Even if he had recovered to his peak, so what? Chapter 967. As soon as Luo Fan heard this, he knew that the Creator had completely understood his situation. He had figured out the various untruths in his memories before the creation of the world. Through his own cultivation experience, he had found the root cause of his current situation. When anyone was dreaming, they would naturally be able to find all sorts of explanations to make the illogical aspects of the dream more reasonable, thus allowing the dream to continue. For example, where did he come from? How did he arrive in this dream world? That was one of the things that made no sense. However, when such illogical points were pointed out, or when that person discovered these illogical points, ordinary people would be startled awake from their dreams. As for ordinary cultivators, they would be able to sense where they were and escape from the dream. They could leave the dream at any time and continue to exist in the dream. As an advanced sage-to-be, the Creator was obviously an extraordinary cultivator. Naturally, she could do this, just like Yin Qingsheng in the past. It's my honor to finally be able to meet you, Taoist. With a thought from Luo Fan, in that strange universe in the River of Time, in front of the Creator, a figure condensed out of thin air. It was Luo Fan. After he appeared, he bowed to the Creator and said. The Creator knew at a glance that this was just a clone. That person was still outside and still in control of his life and death. This was naturally not a good feeling. However, he understood this person's intention and was not too angry. He just smiled and said, "After being in a daze for such a long time, I'm finally able to wake up. It's all thanks to you, Taoist." Luo Fan smiled and waved his hand. The universe changed naturally. In an instant, the countless stars in the universe disappeared. A huge, boundless plain appeared under their feet, and a huge palace was built around them. In the blink of an eye, they were in a majestic palace. It was as if the battle that had lasted for more than 10,000 years did not exist at all. Everything in the palace was perfect, but there was not even a trace of vitality. Moreover, there was a mysterious suction force acting on the Creator. The power that the Creator was recovering was being sucked away, so he could only maintain his current state and could not recover at all. "It seems that you didn't come to my dream to be a guest." The Creator's tone had returned to that of a normal person. However, he was no longer biting on words and pretending to be profound. The aura of this palace was shocking, and it was perfect. However, when that suction force appeared, this great perfection quasi-sage could see through Luo Fan's true intentions. He knew why Luo Fan came to his dream realm. "I'm ashamed. I had no choice but to do it," Luo Fan said shamefully. "Fine, I don't care why you're doing this. Anyway, I have to thank you. It's such a wonderful feeling to be able to dream again." The Creator sighed with emotion. When Luo Fan heard the Creator's words, he couldn't help but admire him. If it was him, he would definitely not be so carefree. Even if he knew that the other party had helped him gain benefits, he would definitely launch a relentless attack after the other party invaded his most private domain. He would make the other party pay the price for invading his domain. However, this also confirmed that Luo Fan's opinion about this person was correct. It was worth it to wake him up at the last moment. "Taoist friend, you are carefree. I admire you." Luo Fan did not hide his admiration and said directly, "What can I do if I'm not carefree?" As for the existence that can make a great tear sage to be, like me fall asleep and dream uncontrollably, it's impossible for me to fight against it. Apart from acting carefree, what else can I do? The creator said with a wry smile. This. Luo Fan didn't expect the creator to think this way. He didn't know what to say for a moment. All right, I've now completely recalled everything that I've done in this dream. I'm sure I'll be able to remember everything when I wake up. You can do it now. The creator paused for a moment and smiled. Just now, he was organizing his memories and everything that he had experienced in this dream. Although these experiences were only in his dream, they were not worthless. After all, although the dream was created by him, everything in it was formed according to his own thinking and the accumulation of his own knowledge. It could be said that it was a reorganization and reconstruction of everything that he had accumulated in the past. Although such memories couldn't directly improve his cultivation, they could provide him with countless inspirations and allow him to absorb endless power for improvement. Naturally, it was extremely precious. How could he let it go? Luo Fan didn't think of this at first. However, when the words came out, he completely understood. He couldn't help but smile and said, I didn't expect that my unintentional effort would bring you so many benefits. Seeing that Luo Fan didn't take credit for his sudden inspiration, the creator couldn't help but have a better impression of Luo Fan. An honest person, no matter where he was, would easily arouse the goodwill of others. Due to the goodwill, he couldn't help but say, You enter my dream to challenge me in order to break through the bottleneck of the intermediate stage of quasi-sage, right? Hearing this, Luo Fan was stunned. Then, he recovered and nodded. You can put it that way. From the peak of the intermediate stage of quasi-sage to the advanced stage of quasi-sage, this may seem like a small increase in cultivation. However, the difference in strength before and after the breakthrough is like the difference between heaven and earth. The difficulty of the breakthrough is also extremely shocking. To achieve such a breakthrough, it can't be achieved through bitter cultivation. If you want to achieve this breakthrough, the best way is to fight. Force yourself to the limit of life and death in a fight. Only in a fight can you break through the bottleneck, blast away the invisible shackles, and complete the sublimation of life, the creator said with a smile. He then started to give Luo Fan some advice in a very strange manner. Of course, this is only my own experience. It's extremely effective for me, but I can't guarantee the effect on you. The advanced stage quasi-sage added after a moment of thought. Thank you for your advice, Taoist friend. When Luo Fan heard this, he wasn't disappointed. Instead, he bowed gratefully towards the creator to express his gratitude. The creator chuckled, saying that it was just some experience and wasn't worth mentioning. After this conversation, the creator sighed, Let's not waste any more time. Let's do it now. However, you know my character. It's impossible for me to surrender without putting up a fight. As he spoke, he suddenly stood up. The power around his body shook, and the entire palace collapsed in an instant. The entire palace turned into nothingness in the blink of an eye. Even the flat ground under their feet began to cave in at this moment, with the place where they stood as the center. It was obvious that they had been hit by an indescribably powerful force. Seeing this, Luo Fan wasn't surprised. The reason why he refused to let his guard down when he was building the palace and talking to the creator of the universe was because he knew the creator's character. He knew that even if he became friends with the creator of the universe knew that he would not give up the battle, even if he couldn't turn the situation around. Therefore, at the moment when the creator made his move, he focused his mind and gathered an endless amount of power into his body. His aura rose infinitely. In the blink of an eye, it was above the entire universe and even above the creator. This universe was a mysterious universe created by the river of time. Everything in it was under the absolute control of Luo Fan. Normally, before Luo Fan entered this place, he could only rely on the universe's ability to create life forms that were on par with him to fight. He couldn't break through the limit. But at this moment, his will was in this universe, and his avatar was inside. Naturally, He could use more exquisite methods to make use of the universe's power. He could gather the power of the universe in a more mysterious way and didn't need to spread it out. At this moment, his avatar's aura rose infinitely, and his power increased infinitely. This was the result of him gathering the power of countless life forms that were on par with him. If the Creator's cultivation realm was higher than his, he wouldn't be able to resist, even if he increased his power infinitely. He could only be easily crushed in a powder. But at this moment, the Creator's cultivation realm was only a little higher than his. Even though this little difference was a tremendous change before and after breaking through the bottleneck, from an absolute point of view, it was only a little difference. This little difference could be offset by unlimited power. Therefore, when Luo Fan raised his power to an almost limitless level, he shouted loudly and rubbed his hands together. A huge fist that was entwined with countless mysterious runes appeared out of thin air. It even had a kind of eternal and indestructible charm, and it smashed toward the Creator of the universe. Facing such a terrifying attack, the Creator let out a huge roar. His body trembled, and his aura changed drastically. An extremely refined and pure iron-blooded aura instantly replaced his previous supreme control aura. It directly broke through the pressure from Luo Fan's aura and even caused the entire universe to shake violently as if he could break through at any time. Such a battle method was completely different from the Creator's battle method in the past 10,000 years. Clearly, after he recovered his memory and understood his situation, he finally remembered his true battle method and his true battle god art. After the iron-blooded aura broke through all restrictions, the Creator's body trembled, and he struck a punch towards the fist descending from the sky. As he struck, an iron-blooded light rushed out from his fist and condensed into billions of fish shadows in front of him. Every single one of these fish shadows was extremely tough and powerful. They gave off an aura that seemed to be able to destroy and defeat everything. They covered the sky and the earth as they collided with the giant fist that was surrounded by countless strange runes and gave off an aura of eternal immortality. There was no sound at all. However, the void of the universe shattered in an instant. Space powder and time powder turned into a mist that spread out in all directions. It grew larger and larger until it even affected the river of time outside the universe, causing the river of time to surge and the waves to become even more intense and terrifying. This was the result of the collision between the Creator's true God art and the infinite power of the universe condensed by Luo Fan. From this, it could be seen how shocking and terrifying the true God art of the Creator was. After the flag transformed into the river of time, the power of the universe had greatly increased. The number of living beings that could be condensed was also thousands of times more than before. In the past 10,000 years, no matter how the Creator fought, he could not cause any damage to the universe and could not spread the aftermath of the battle. At this moment, the universe, which had been enhanced by hundreds or thousands of times in power, was actually able to cause such a huge change in the outside world with just a single collision. One could imagine the huge difference in his strength before and after awakening. A true great completion quasi-sage is indeed unimaginably powerful. Fortunately, he did not awaken earlier. Otherwise, I'm afraid I would have lost. Luo Fan, who was below the river of time, could not help but exclaim in admiration. Although the aftermath of the battle had even affected the river of time, as long as the universe was not completely destroyed and the Creator could not leave the universe, the result would not change. The failure of the creation tablet would not be reversed just because his strength had increased by so many times. In this case, what did he have to worry about? Naturally, he had sufficient reason to leisurely admire the strength of his opponent. In the universe within the river of time, the result of the fist collision between Luo Fan and the Creator had already appeared. The result was a draw. The countless fish shadows of the Creator did not attack Luo Fan's body, and the huge fist that Luo Fan sent out did not break through the interception of the fish shadows to attack the Creator's body. The attacks that the two of them sent out were annihilated at the same time and disappeared at the same time, as if the collision had never happened. Good, the creator shouted with an excited look on his face. His eyes were filled with an indescribable fighting spirit and joy. It was as if he was purely enjoying the intense battle. This expression was exactly the same as the one he had when he had first started fighting with Luo Fan. It represented his truest and most original state of mind, and it represented how pure his desire and enjoyment for battle were. As he spoke, his body swayed, and he pounced towards Luo Fan like a huge bird. Behind him, countless sabers and weapons appeared out of thin air. As he waved his hand, they converged into an overwhelming river that rushed towards Luo Fan. Looking at their momentum, it was as if they wanted to crush Luo Fan into powder. Every one of these sabers and weapons was extremely powerful. Although their strength had just reached the intermediate level of Sage to Be, they had unimaginable battle instincts. The magic skills that they performed in the void were not what an ordinary intermediate level Sage to Be could perform. They were so powerful that they could destroy the world. As he performed this move, the entire universe seemed to be submerged in the endless sabers and weapons. Almost instantly, the situation reversed, and Luo Fan seemed to have fallen into the opponent's universe. In the face of such an attack, Luo Fan's eyes lit up. With a light shout, his body suddenly enlarged by tens of thousands of times. Even the entire universe seemed narrow, as if the universe could no longer contain him. Then he waved his hands, and thousands of arms grew out from under his ribs. They grabbed in all directions, and every grab could crush millions of sabers and weapons into powder. In an instant, a large space was cleared. However, no matter how he pinched them, the sabers and weapons would be destroyed and reborn. No matter how he attacked and destroyed, the sabers and weapons would submerge him again in the next moment. It was as if all his efforts were in vain and had no effect at all. It's really powerful. If this wasn't the river of time, even a great level Sage to Be wouldn't be able to survive for long under such an attack. At the very least, the Talisman King in the previous dream world would definitely die under this move. Luo Fan, who was outside, could not help but exclaim in admiration when he saw the power of this move. In a battle between cultivators, numbers did not have much meaning. Generally speaking, the difference of one realm was enough to resist all increases in numbers and crush all cultivators whose realm was lower than theirs. However, there was a limit. Hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands, millions of these numbers were naturally in line with this rule and did not pose much of a threat to cultivators whose realms were higher than theirs. However, when this number increased to tens of billions, hundreds of billions, trillions, 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 it was enough to break this rule and crush cultivators whose realms were higher than theirs. At this moment, the number of sabers and weapons that the creator displayed was more than trillions. If it wasn't for the fact that Luo Fan's power was almost limitless in this universe, he would have been killed by these sabers and weapons. It was a pity that this possibility did not appear. Therefore, the result would not change. 3 years later, when Luo Fan once again destroyed countless sabers and weapons, the creator could no longer maintain the huge consumption of this move. He let out a long sigh and said, "What a pity. If it wasn't for the previous consumption of power, the strength of these sabers and weapons could have been raised to the peak of the intermediate level Sage to Be. If that was the case, I'm afraid the result would have been completely different." With that, his body swayed and gradually disappeared. Chapter 968. Not even spirits could compare. Oem had almost reached the level of the creator of this star system. So that's how it is. I didn't think that Dreamscape would be like this. Luo Fan muttered to himself as he sorted through the countless stray pieces of information he had obtained from the void. In this star system, there was a huge cultivation sect. This cultivation sect was called the Hidden Armor Sect, and it was one of the top 10,000 sects in Dreamscape. The strongest expert in the entire sect was a peak mid-tier quasi-saint. There were dozens of low-tier quasi-saints, hundreds of early-tier quasi-saints, and tens of thousands of Grand Luo Xiantian cultivators. Those below the Grand Luo Xiantian realm were numerous, but they could only serve as slaves. This largest life-bearing planet was the headquarters of the Hidden Armor sect. On the entire planet, there were less than 1 million people in the Hidden Armor sect. Apart from the largest planet, the 3 smaller life-sustaining planets were inhabited by the rest of the population of the entire star system, apart from the millions of people here. That number was in the trillions. These trillions of people were densely packed into the 3 planets that were hundreds or thousands of times larger than Earth, causing the 3 life-bearing planets to constantly exude an aura of being overwhelmed. If it weren't for the widespread use of countless cultivation tools, these 3 planets would never be able to accommodate so many people. In this star system, the Hidden Armor sect was an unparalleled existence. Apart from the Hidden Armor sect, everyone else was just a slave, a lamb. Their only purpose in life was to serve and support the Hidden Armor sect. And the Hidden Armor sect enjoyed this support with peace of mind, enjoying the labor of the trillions of people. At most, they would occasionally sprinkle some cultivation tools that they didn't care for to those planets. But even so, they were already deeply grateful, even wishing they could offer up their lives. Such a large planet only has a few million people, but the 3 planets that add up to less than 1/100th of this planet have trillions of people. What a freak. Luo Fan couldn't help but sigh as he sorted out all this information. He naturally wouldn't be courteous to such a sect. With a thought, he took a step forward, passing through countless defensive barriers and arriving on the largest planet, arriving above the headquarters of the Hidden Armor sect. For the Hidden Armor sect to occupy such a massive planet, the amount of resources they possessed could be imagined. And beneath the endless accumulation of resources, the Hidden Armor sect headquarters was magnificent, majestic, and wondrous, nearly reaching the limits of any living being's imagination. The headquarters of the sect was a vast and boundless building complex. The buildings in this group of buildings were extremely ingenious, majestic, and imposing. The ground was paved with beautiful jade, and the bricks used to build the buildings were all refined metals that cultivators would fight over. The air was filled with medicinal fragrances refined from countless exotic flowers and herbs. There were exotic flowers and herbs everywhere, and there was fine wine everywhere. The sky was filled with multicolored light, and it was truly a paradise on Earth. In such a building complex, there were quite a lot of people. From time to time, there would be streaks of light flying up from a certain part of this building complex, crossing a large area of the building complex and landing in another area. Or they could just fly away from this building complex and head somewhere else on this planet. The entire building complex exuded a scene full of vitality. Although it is beautiful, it isn't a place for cultivation. Luo Fan shook his head and sighed. He wasn't someone who was obsessed with moral purity, and he didn't feel too much anger towards the Hidden Armor sect for squandering the fruits of the efforts of trillions of people. Let alone the fact that this was only a dream world. Everything that happened here was fake. Even if this was the real world, he wouldn't care too much about it. For the current him, the myriad forms of the world were all laid out before his eyes, and he had long since seen through them. With just a thought, he could clearly understand the root of this, and he understood that this was unavoidable. Thus, he naturally wouldn't feel any negative emotions because of this. At this time, he shook his head and sighed. This Hidden Armor sect had clearly been influenced by the worldview of the mortal world, and their heart of cultivation had been completely obscured by the mortal world. They seemed more like a dynasty of the mortal world, but they were no longer a cultivation sect that sought the Tao. Such a cultivation sect, to someone like him who wholeheartedly pursued the Tao, was naturally something that he couldn't bear to see. After shaking his head and sighing, Luo Fan didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and arrived somewhere in this building complex. This was the core of the defensive array that protected the entire sect, and it was also the place with the richest origin energy in the entire sect and the most wonderful cultivation environment. Here, there was an extremely magnificent palace. This palace seemed as if it had been specially built for giants. The doors were 1,000 feet high, and there were several massive words written on them. Heavenly Palace. In the depths of this palace, there were several extremely powerful auras that flickered in and out of existence. This is it. Luo Fan nodded and stepped into the palace. At this time, he no longer hid his aura. Of course, he didn't deliberately release his aura either. This change would only allow others to sense that someone had entered, but they wouldn't be able to sense how powerful this person was. At this moment, the several powerful auras in the heavenly palace shook violently. They suddenly changed from their original, faintly discernible form to soaring into the sky and suddenly pressing down on Luo Fan. At the same time, an extremely imposing voice rang out in Luo Fan's ears. This is the sect's forbidden area. Anyone who dares to trespass will be killed without mercy. With that, the entire heavenly palace seemed to come alive. Boundless pressure was generated from all directions and crushed down on Luo Fan's body. If it had been anyone else, even a mid-tier quasi-sage or a Dao integration cultivator, they would definitely have been unable to resist this pressure and would have been at the mercy of others. However, this was Luo Fan. In the face of this pressure, he didn't even frown. His expression was extremely calm as he continued to walk forward unhurriedly. Although the pressure was extremely terrifying and its power alone had already surpassed the boundary of the path integration realm, the power was extremely messy and did not pose any threat to someone like Luo Fan, who had a high cultivation realm. He did not even need to retaliate. He only needed to occasionally move his body, and he would be able to easily get rid of the pressure. Compared to a greater tier quasi-sage, this power is like child's play. Luo Fan even had the mood to sigh. You're not a disciple of our sect. Who the hell are you? A furious roar came from the depths of the palace. Then, several figures crossed the void and directly appeared in front of Luo Fan. These figures were all elders. Among them, there were 7 men and 2 women. The aura they exuded had all reached the mid-tier quasi-sage level. The strongest elder's aura had even reached the peak of the mid-tier quasi-sage level. Although he was far from being comparable to Luo Fan, he was already a powerful existence that was only a step away from the greater tier quasi-sage level. The one who spoke just now was obviously the strongest elder. Luo Fan looked at these people and said indifferently, "You are the 9 strongest people of the Hidden Armor sect. I need your memories." Although Luo Fan didn't care too much about the actions of the Hidden Armor sect, he wouldn't feel any anger because of it. But at the same time, because of such actions, he wouldn't have any thoughts of pitying him for his cultivation, but not ruining his cultivation. Naturally, he would use the simplest and most direct method to obtain the information he wanted. The first thing one needed when stepping into any dream realm was the information of this world. The best way to obtain sufficient information was to obtain it from the memories of the experts in this dream realm. After all, even though using one's own eyes to see and sense the information drifting in the void was also a way, the information one could obtain was sufficient in the end. However, the amount of time and energy required to do so was simply too much. There was a tremendous amount of information drifting about in the void, and it contained an endless amount of meaningless information. It was naturally extremely troublesome to sort out the information that was useful to oneself, and the amount of energy required was also extremely great. The reason why Luo Fan had used this method to obtain information about this star system was because it was just a star system. It wasn't too difficult for him, and the energy required was also easily bearable. However, how many star systems were there in the entire dream realm? When Luo Fan first stepped into Dream World and looked up, he could see trillions of stars in this world. And this was just a casual glance. It was impossible for there to be so many stars in the dream realm. Under such circumstances, if he used the method of sorting out the information drifting in the void to obtain information about this dream realm, the amount of energy and time required would be unimaginable. Since there was a shortcut to obtain this information, why would Luo Fan choose such a stupid method? When the people heard Luo Fan's words, expressions of shock and anger appeared on their faces. "You're courting death." Before the strongest person could speak, A female elder beside him shouted angrily. She raised her hand, and a golden-armored deity appeared out of thin air, suddenly pouncing towards Luo Fan. This golden-armored deity was formed directly by energy. However, it wasn't formed directly by energy. Instead, the energy was first condensed into small components, which then formed the golden-armored deity. The energy aura emitted by the golden-armored deity was only at the intermediate sage-to-be realm. However, the strength that the assembled golden-armored deity could exert was far beyond the energy that formed it. It had reached the peak of the intermediate sage-to-be realm. Luo Fan glanced at the golden-armored deity and instantly saw through all the mysteries within it. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Although this cultivator isn't a cultivator, the things he refined are really good." This golden-armored deity looked mysterious, but in fact its principle was similar to that of a combat robot. Just like the legendary robots, if they were taken apart, they would be nothing more than pieces of metal or non-metal materials. However, if they were put together, every single part would be able to interact with each other and display unimaginable power. They would be able to obtain super powerful abilities that were far beyond what those parts could compare to when they were separated. These abilities were different from the abilities of living creatures. Naturally, there wouldn't be any aura. Luo Fan exclaimed in admiration, but his hands didn't stop because of his admiration. Seeing the golden-armored deity rushing straight at him, the smile on his face didn't change. He raised his hand and gently patted. The tens of millions of dodging changes that the golden-armored deity had set up didn't play any role, and Luo Fan's pat landed on his chest. Chapter 969. This slap caused the golden-armored deity's body to tremble. In an instant, all the parts on its body instantly scattered, as if they had been casually piled up in the first place. They shot out in all directions. In the blink of an eye, the golden-armored deity turned into a pile of scattered energy fragments. These fragments continued to fall apart in the process and eventually turned into nothingness. Not long after, the golden-armored deity. Seeing this, the 7 men and 2 women were dumbfounded. Their faces were filled with extreme shock. It was as if they could not believe what was happening before their eyes. They did not dare to imagine that someone could be so powerful that they could destroy the puppets that their hidden armor sect had spent tens of thousands of years to refine so easily. Among them, the master of the golden-armored deity, the old woman, had a horrified expression. The aura around her surged, and she could not control herself. She spat out a mouthful of blood. However, everyone present was a medium-tier sage-to-be, after all. Their ability to control their emotions was extremely strong. After being stunned for a moment, they immediately came back to their senses. Each of them let out a furious roar, and the golden-armored deities behind them charged forward. These golden-armored deities all had different appearances. Even their forms were different. Some looked like tall and strong men, some looked like old men, and some even looked like petite and adorable women. The weapons that these golden-armored deities wielded were also different. Each of them had their own unique characteristics and profundities. Apart from the old woman whose strongest puppet had been destroyed, the other 8 did not hold back and release their strongest puppets. A total of 8 golden-armored deities charged towards Luo Fan. Moreover, their method of pouncing wasn't a random pounce. Instead, it revolved around 8 extremely profound trajectories that complemented and complemented each other, forming an extremely profound method of attack. They unleashed power that surpassed what they originally possessed and even contained a hint of transcendence. It was as if their overall power had been raised to the great tier quasi-sage realm. Of course, it was just like that. The great tier quasi-sage realm. It was equivalent to the transcendence realm. Even though Luo Fan had accumulated so much, he was still limited by that extremely stable bottleneck. How could it be that easy to break through? Even if he gathered all the power of these 8 powerful puppets, even if he used all kinds of mysterious techniques to multiply the power of these puppets, it was also impossible for him to break through this bottleneck. No matter how much transcendence the power contained, it was still limited to the level of the intermediate stage, Sage to B peak. At most, it could barely be on par with Luo Fan's current realm. For Luo Fan, this kind of power, although it was hundreds of times more threatening than the golden armored deity from before, it was not enough to harm Luo Fan at all. It should be known that Luo Fan could use the mysteries of the tide of the times to display an existence that could even kill a great perfection Sage to be. How could this kind of power, which barely reached the peak of intermediate Sage to be, cause any harm to him? With a slight shift of his mind, his figure flickered, and he directly transcended time and space. At almost the same time, he appeared before every golden armored deity. In other words, he appeared before every single puppet. He raised his hand and clapped. Then he imprinted it on the chests of the 8 puppets. The same situation as before happened at the same time. The 8 puppets stopped moving at the same time, and then they shattered into pieces, turning into countless energy-condensed parts and fragments. The fragments splattered all over the room, making it extremely messy. As for these energy fragments, after they broke up, they did not stop changing. Instead, they continued to break up. Finally, they turned into countless energy fragments that scattered in all directions. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared completely. It was as if the golden armored deity had never appeared. Such a straightforward manner. Seeing this, the 9 strongest people from the Hidden Armor sect were filled with despair. Luo Fan looked at them, shook his head, and sighed. Although you have a high level of cultivation, you are too reliant on external objects. You are unable to fully display your cultivation. What a pity. Luo Fan sighed with a look of pity on his face. He looked at the few of them with a look full of sympathy. Those people still wanted to say something, but Luo Fan didn't wait for them. With a slight thought, he raised his hand, and the 9 people felt that they were firmly fixed in the void by an irresistible and terrifying force. They couldn't even circulate the power in their bodies. Their spirit, perception, and body couldn't move at all. Before they could say anything, Luo Fan had already made a grabbing motion in the air. From their bodies, an invisible and intangible strange existence rushed out from the top of their heads, gathered into a ball, and directly arrived in front of Luo Fan. This invisible existence was the memories that the 9 of them had accumulated over the course of their lives. It contained all their experiences, all their knowledge, all the information they knew, and even all their desires. At this moment, Luo Fan's method was to completely extract their memories. It could be said that the moment their memories were extracted, these 9 people had completely lost all their memories and became 9 pieces of white paper. If they were asked anything at this moment, they would not be able to understand, let alone answer. Of course, this was only for the moment. After all, they were powerful existences at the intermediate stage of the Sage to Be level. Since they could be called Sage to Be, the power of their divine abilities was naturally unimaginable. Although they had lost all their memories, their bodies, their power, their cultivation, and their realms still existed. As existences at the Sage to Be level, they must have left a deep imprint on themselves in all the things that still existed, which naturally contained countless memories and information. As a result, even though their memories had been completely extracted and they had become like a blank piece of paper, even idiots who could not understand words or language, their bodies, power, cultivation, and realm would naturally take effect after a period of time. The information contained in their memories would naturally be transmitted back to their souls. Even though their divine souls could not completely recover their memories, they would only lose some memories that had nothing to do with power or cultivation. They would not truly become idiots. Luo Fan was naturally very clear about this. However, even if he did not know about this, even if the 9 of them would become fools after their memories were extracted, Luo Fan would definitely not change his decision just because he was being polite to them. Luo Fan stood in front of the 9 of them. He did not care about what they were thinking. He raised his hand, and the ball that was formed from their memories of saving people fell into his hand. The ball was crystal clear, and there seemed to be countless tiny specks that were as tiny as dust within it. Each of these specks represented a memory that could form a world of memories. They all represented a memory that could form a world of memories. These countless specks of dust represented a world of memories. These countless specks of dust represented a world of memories. Furthermore, the amount of information contained within the memories that could form a world of memories would reach an unimaginable level. If it was a normal person, they would not be able to do so. If a normal person were to receive even 1/100th of the information, their brain would probably explode due to the overwhelming amount of information. From this, one could see how terrifying the amount of information was. Faced with so much information, Luo Fan was very satisfied. He nodded slightly. He was not afraid of too much information. He was only afraid of too little information. The more information there was, this meant that he could obtain more information about this world of dreams. On the other hand, if the amount of information was too little, it meant that he might not be able to find much of the information he needed. With his rationality, how could he not know what to expect in these two situations? To analyze so much information, even for Luo Fan, it was not a task that could be completed in an instant. Thus, he did not stay here any longer. He found an ordinary cave in one of the forbidden areas on this planet. He took a step forward and directly moved through the void, arriving in the cave and sitting down. Although this planet was under the complete control of the Hidden Armor sect, it was still a huge planet. The cultivation environment was so wonderful, and the vitality was so rich. Therefore, many powerful beasts and monsters were born on this planet. It was extraordinary. These beasts or demons were extraordinary in the primordial world. They might not be able to withstand a single blow from a true expert, but to most of the disciples of the Hidden Armor sect, they were extraordinary. They were existences that could not be defended against. Thus, it was inevitable that there would be forbidden areas on this planet. This was so that disciples who were not strong enough would not get into trouble by recklessly barging into them. Of course, such forbidden areas were naturally divided into different levels. Some restricted disciples at or below the primordial unity realm, some restricted disciples at the connate zenith realm, some restricted disciples at the early stage of the sage to be, and some restricted disciples at the early stage of the sage to be. The forbidden area that Luo Fan had chosen was one that restricted disciples at the early stage of the sage to be. It was extraordinary. Such a forbidden area posed no threat to him at all. But to the life forms of the Hidden Armor sect, only those at the intermediate stage of the quasi-sage realm could enter. Naturally, he would not be disturbed, and he would be able to analyze the extraordinary memories he had obtained. After Luo Fan left, the 9 strongest experts of the Hidden Armor sect stood still like stone statues in the heavens buttocks of the Hidden Armor sect. Their faces were blank, and their eyes were lifeless. They looked like idiots. The Gantian buttocks was where the strongest experts like them cultivated in seclusion. Normally, no one dared to step into the vicinity of the buttocks. Thus, they did not have to worry about being discovered by others for a short period of time when they were doing something so abnormal here. This was the truth. It was extraordinary. In the next half a month, no one stepped into the vicinity of Gantian's buttocks every day. No one noticed that their abnormal behavior was extraordinary. This gave them a chance to organize themselves and recover their memories. During this half a month, their eyes gradually focused and became lively. The dullness in their eyes lessened, and their expressions became more vivid and complicated. Their bodies also underwent many changes. It was extraordinary. The old age that was left on their bodies gradually disappeared, and they became extraordinary. During this process, the 9 old men and women gradually became 9 young men and women. The 7 old men and women became 7 handsome, strong, thin, ordinary, and fat youths. They looked like they were in their 20s or 30s. The 2 old women, on the other hand, became extremely beautiful. It was as if any of their looks could make all men so infatuated with them that they would forget to eat and starve to death. It was extraordinary. Every one of them looked around 18 years old and was extraordinary. This kind of change was simply earth-shattering. If Luo Fan was here, he might not dare to believe that these 9 people were the 9 old men he had dealt with before. They were extraordinary people from the great desolate land. The reason why the 9 of them had such a change was very simple. It was because their mentality had changed because of the change in their memories. To cultivators, as long as they were at the 5th or 6th stage of the mortal realm, their appearance could be changed at will. It was extraordinary. Therefore, to cultivators, it was extraordinary. The appearance of those who were at the 5th or 6th stage of the mortal realm and above was no longer related to their age. It was no longer related to the time they had experienced. It was extraordinary. It was only related to their mentality that it was extraordinary. In other words, it was extraordinary. To cultivators who were above the 5th or 6th stage of the mortal realm, it was extraordinary. Their mentalities were young, and their appearances were extraordinary in the primordial world. Their mentality was old, and their appearance was extraordinary in the primordial world. Naturally, they were old and extraordinary. The reason why the 9 cultivators looked so old was not because they had lived for so long, so their faces involuntarily became old. They had no choice but to show the extraordinary appearance of old people like them. It was just because they were extraordinary. They had experienced too much and had seen through everything. They thought that they were old and extraordinary. More than half a month ago, after all of their memories were completely taken away by Luo Fan, they had already become 9 pieces of white paper. They were like 9 babies that had just been born. Their minds were blank, and they had no memories at all. They had not been contaminated by the mortal world, and they were extraordinary. If that continued, it would be extraordinary. Their figures and appearances would naturally, gradually change to that of babies. In the end, they would become extraordinary. However, their essence was that of a mid-tier quasi-saint. To them, it was extraordinary. The information of their memories had long been engraved inside and outside their bodies. When their memories completely disappeared, the information of their memories naturally poured into their souls from all over their bodies. It was extraordinary. It was extraordinary. It restored most of their memories. Such a change seemed to be able to restore their memories with just one turn. It was as extraordinary as the primordial era. In fact, it caused their essence to undergo a tremendous change. It was extraordinary. Although the memories that came from all over their bodies still belonged to them, they were not completely memorized by their own will. Instead, they were naturally imprinted by their bodies, their power, their cultivation, and their realm. It was extraordinary. The content of the information contained in these memories was no different from their own memories, except for the content. It was extraordinary. However, the way it was used was completely different from their own memories. The things that were remembered by the self-will were, of course, different from the things that were branded by the body. The things that were remembered by the self-will were all changed and processed, but the memories that were branded by the body and other existences were absolutely objective memories that were extraordinary. It was precisely because of this difference in perspective that the memories that were transmitted back were the same as the memories that they themselves contained. However, to them, it was just like the memories of their previous lives. It could not be completely integrated into one with them, let alone reshape their mentality bit by bit, turning them from pure and innocent like a piece of white paper to an extraordinary and old primordial era. It was only to let them know who they were, how many years they had lived, and what they had done during those years. It was extraordinary. In this way, their mentality was still the innocent hearts of more than half a month ago. It was only because they had received so many memories that they had grown a little. In the end, their mentality was fixed. It was the mentality of a young man who had just matured. It was extraordinary. The appearance was born from the heart. It turned their old and decrepit appearance into the youthful appearance of the young man in front of them. It was extraordinary. When all the memories surged back to their souls from all over their bodies, the 9 of them came back to their senses. They looked at each other and even revealed a smile of enlightenment and lingering fear. I didn't expect that it would be a blessing in disguise this time. It allowed me to see many things that I had missed in the past. I'm afraid I have to thank that expert. Extraordinary. The woman who had attacked Luo Fan sighed and said extraordinary. I didn't expect that we had done so many wrong things over the years. I really can't believe that we did all those things. Extraordinary. Another woman sighed and said regretfully, What's the point of saying this now? What's important is that we have seen everything clearly. Why don't we talk about how to change it? Extraordinary. A strong man frowned and said extraordinary. You guys go ahead. I feel that the bottleneck of my cultivation has loosened a lot. I need to cultivate in seclusion for a period of time to see if I can make a breakthrough. Extraordinary. Another skinny young man waved his hand and said extraordinary. So you also feel the same way? Extraordinary primordial world. What a coincidence. I also feel the same way. Why don't we verify each other and break through together? The eyes of the ordinary-looking man beside him lit up and said extraordinary. How is this a coincidence? This is obviously extraordinary. At this moment, the man who was in the lead and had the highest cultivation level sighed and said extraordinary. Why do you say that, big senior brother? The young man who had said it was a coincidence frowned and asked extraordinary. We are feeling everything with the hearts of innocent children. Naturally, we can see through all the fog without being affected by external things. It is natural that we can see the flaws in our cultivation. Let alone the two of you. I'm afraid all of us will feel the same way. Extraordinary. The big senior brother sighed and said extraordinary. Chapter 970. So that's how it is. It seems that our hidden armor sect has a chance to fight for a spot to enter the sanctuary, as long as one of us can reach the peak of the intermediate stage of the quasi-saint stage. The eyes of the woman who had attacked Luo Fan lit up as she spoke. That's right. That's right. Let's continue our closed-door training. The next battle for a spot to enter the sanctuary will be in 10,000 years. Second junior brother, third junior sister, the two of you should strive to break through your bottlenecks in the next 10,000 years. That way, our chances of obtaining a spot to enter the sanctuary will greatly increase, the eldest senior brother said with a smile. His eyes were filled with an indescribable longing for the so-called sanctuary. It was a longing for a position that they had not dared to imagine in the past, but one that they had been looking forward to for many years. Just as the 9 strongest people of the Hidden Armor sect were discussing the changes that had taken place over the past half a month, Luo Fan, who was in a forbidden area on the planet, had already analyzed the countless memories he had obtained from the 9 people. He now had an extremely deep understanding of the dream world and countless secrets of the dream world. It turns out that there's a so-called sanctuary in this world. It seems that the advanced stage of the quasi-saint stage is very likely to be in the sanctuary. I need to find a way to enter the Holy Land to take a look. After analyzing the many memories, such a thought flashed in Luo Fan's mind. Over the past half a month, he had analyzed the memories of the 9 experts of the Hidden Armor sect and learned many secrets of the dreamscape world. He knew that there was a vast and boundless universe in this world, and that there were countless living beings and cultivation sections. But above this, there was a space that stood above the entire universe, a space that all the sects in the universe yearned to step into at all times, the Saint region. It was said that the cultivation environment in the sanctuary was hundreds of millions of times better than that of the universe. There were even sages who would preach to the cultivators there every day. Any cultivation resources were readily available, and any bottlenecks in cultivation were greatly weakened. It could even be said that as long as one was willing to cultivate, they could become a sage. This was something that was just around the corner. There were all sorts of legends. Many of them sounded extremely absurd, but they had been legends for countless years. Even the most rational cultivator would not completely disbelieve them. At most, he was just doubtful, but in his heart, he was also looking forward to going to the sacred region. Not just any living being could step into the saint realm. In fact, not all cultivators were qualified to do so. The qualifications to enter the saint level were actually distributed by the sect. Every 100,000 years, there would be 1,000 slots to enter the saint realm. In other words, every 100,000 years, 1,000 sects could enter the sanctuary. There were tens of millions of sects in the entire universe. To select 1,000 sects from so many sects, saying that 1 in 10,000 was an understatement. The Hidden Armor sect was originally ranked in the top 10,000 of the entire universe, but it was a very low ranking. It was completely impossible for them to enter the top 1,000. It was also for this reason. The Hidden Armor sect was originally very content. Although everyone longed to enter the sacred region, they didn't really take it as a goal and didn't really intend to participate in the qualification battle. And this time, it was because of Luo Fan that the 9 strongest people of the Hidden Armor sect had an unexpected opportunity. It allowed them to regain the innocence of a newborn baby. Almost everyone had the chance to improve again and break through the bottleneck. But how many of them succeeded? The Hidden Armor sect's ranking would be greatly improved, although they might not be qualified to enter the sacred region. But there was already a lot of hope that they would succeed. It was precisely because of this that they had such wild ambitions. The sect that organized this competition is the Origin sect. Their location seems to be extremely mysterious. They won't appear unless it's time. The location of the competition is also different every time. There is no fixed point. If you want to enter the sacred region, unless you completely see through the secrets of the dream world, you can only rely on the rules of the dream world and enter with the help of a sect. Luo Fan pondered. His eyes shone with a light that could see through everything. He observed the dream world deeply, looking for the secrets hidden in the depths of the dream world. He tried hard to find the traces of the sacred region, wanting to find the real location of the sacred region so that he could directly enter it. The sacred region was a space above the universe, so it was naturally above the universe as a whole. It was not limited to a certain place in the universe. In other words, if one were to find the entrance to the sacred region, they would be able to enter the sacred region from any location in the universe. If one couldn't find the entrance or the way to enter, they might not be able to enter it even if they searched the universe and all the space-time in the universe. It was precisely because there was no location restriction that Luo Fan didn't need to leave the planet at this time. He didn't need to go to the location where the Sanctuary Gateway appeared last time to search for the existence of the sanctuary. Instead, he directly used his own ability to search for the existence of the sanctuary. At this moment, Luo Fan's cultivation realm had reached the highest level of the Dao integration realm. Even his aura was full of transcendent intent. The power of his mystic powers was so great that he was only a small step away from a true transcendent expert. He directly exerted his eyesight to the limit, and he could see many times more things than usual. In an instant, the space-time of the entire dream world was constantly disintegrating and changing in his eyes. All kinds of hidden secrets and mysteries were constantly revealed in front of him, which made his understanding of the space-time of the dream world deepen. Combined with all kinds of information obtained from the memories of the 9 powerhouses of the Hidden Armor sect, he had a deeper understanding of the secrets of the dream world. These various comprehensions made him feel that the power of the mystic powers he could exert in the dream world had become stronger and stronger. However, although there were all kinds of gains, there was nothing that he really wanted to find and obtain. The sacred region was still a fog in his eyes. Even if he searched the entire space-time and illuminated all the laws and laws hidden in the void of the dream world, he still couldn't find any traces of the sacred region. It was as if the sacred region didn't exist at all and was just a rumor. Of course, if that was the case, with Luo Fan's confidence, he would treat the legend of the sacred region as a rumor and not take it to heart. However, in his senses, he vaguely discovered that in the depths of the void of the dream world, hidden in countless layers of space-time, there was a deeper, more obscure, and more mysterious existence. That existence was so obscure. It was so deep. In Luo Fan's intuition, there seemed to be a power that could wipe him out like an ant, so he didn't dare to ignore it. So, it's like this. It seems that I still have to deal with the Hidden Armor sect. Luo Fan carefully sensed for a long time. He thought to himself as he let out a long sigh. Since he couldn't find the entrance to the sacred region, but he could faintly sense the existence of the sacred region, Luo Fan naturally had no way to find a shortcut to enter the sacred region. And without a shortcut, he could only follow the rules of the dream world. He had to enter through the normal channels. And the normal way was to join a sect and then compete for one of the 1,000 places. And obviously, for Luo Fan, it didn't matter which sect he joined. Whether it was the strongest or the weakest sect, He had absolute confidence that he could lead them to obtain one of the 1,000 places. Under such circumstances, it naturally didn't matter which sect he joined, and obviously, he was currently in the Hidden Armor sect. How could joining another sect be more convenient than joining the Hidden Armor sect? With a decision made in his heart, with a thought from Luo Fan, the entire planet was brought into his mind. Everything that had happened in the Hidden Armor sect in this half a month was no longer a secret to him. So that's how it is. One unexpected gain. After understanding the changes that had occurred in the Hidden Armor sect over the past half a month, he couldn't help but laugh. After understanding the changes in the Hidden Armor sect, he instantly discovered the changes of the 9 powerhouses and couldn't help but be surprised. The changes that had occurred to the 9 powerhouses of the Hidden Armor sect weren't complicated at all. If Luo Fan wanted to understand, he didn't even need to think about it. As long as he thought about it, he would be able to clearly guess the consequences of what had happened, even more clearly than what the person involved would understand afterwards. He also needed to understand, but he wasn't a bored person who had nothing better to do. He had too many things to do, so where would he have the time or energy to think about such senseless things? Thus, the changes that occurred to the 9 powerhouses after losing their memories were completely beyond his expectations. After discovering this, he felt that it was an eye-opener. This is even better. It saves me a lot of trouble. With that, he stood up and took a step forward, instantly teleporting through the void. In the blink of an eye, he had already appeared in the Tian Palace where he had previously been. At this moment, the 9 people had already returned to their original positions in seclusion and began to cultivate again. The palace was empty, with not a single person present. However, even though the 9 of them lost their memories, their cultivation level was not affected at all. Their perceptive abilities were not any weaker than before. On the contrary, because of their innocent hearts that came unexpectedly, their perceptive abilities became even sharper. When Luo Fan came to the Tian Palace, he didn't conceal his aura in the slightest. They naturally discovered Luo Fan the moment he entered the palace. As the void trembled, they appeared in front of Luo Fan almost at the same time. Looking at the existence in front of them who seemed to be their enemy, but also their benefactor, their expressions were very complicated. They couldn't decide how to face Luo Fan. Of course, the biggest factor was Luo Fan's strength. If Luo Fan was very weak, they might not have a headache because of it. Naturally, they would do whatever they wanted. If they were in a bad mood, they would teach him a lesson, and if they were in a good mood, they would thank him. That was all. May I know the purpose of your visit? The eldest senior brother was the leader, so he had no choice but to step forward and ask Luo Fan. Nothing else. I just want to enter this sanctuary with your noble sect. What does your esteemed sect think? Luo Fan smiled slightly. He didn't lie and said directly. As soon as he finished speaking, the expressions of everyone present changed slightly, their eyes brightening. Each of them had an incomparably complex feeling towards Luo Fan, not knowing how to treat him properly, but the previous negotiation had already made them all understand how powerful Luo Fan was. If he were to join the Hidden Armor sect and work hard to help the Hidden Armor sect step into the Saint Realm, it would truly be a heaven-shaking joy for the Hidden Armor sect. Stepping into the Saint Realm was almost a certainty, and there was no longer any possibility of uncertainty. Good. From today onwards, fellow Taoist is a guest grand elder of my Hidden Armor sect. You can enjoy the same treatment as us, and you don't need to bear any responsibilities, nor do you need to pay any price. You only need to help our sect obtain the qualifications to enter the sanctuary 10,000 years from now. The eldest senior brother made a prompt decision. He said directly. Luo Fan smiled and nodded. In that case, Luo Fan is a disciple of the Hidden Armor sect from now on. Since I am one of us, these memories, today, I will return them to sect master and elders. As he spoke, with a wave of his right hand, a sparkling and translucent sphere instantly appeared in his palm. Then the sphere split into 9, turning into 9 spheres. They flew towards the 9 experts of the Hidden Armor sect, coming to a stop in front of them. When the 9 people saw this, their eyes were filled with surprise and joy. When the 9 sparkling and translucent spheres appeared in front of them, they instead fell into a state of hesitation, their eyes filled with struggle. It was as if they wanted to take back these memories, but they had many misgivings and did not dare to directly act. Luo Fan looked at them, slightly taken aback, and then suddenly understood what they were worried about. However, although he knew, he did not intend to care about them. He just smiled and watched them constantly struggle. After a long time, the eldest senior brother let out a long sigh. He lifted his hand and patted the sphere in front of him. In an instant, an incomparably powerful force wrapped around the sphere, causing it to violently shake. The sphere directly collapsed, turning into countless pieces of information that drifted into the void, completely disappearing without a trace. Evidently, he had already made up his mind. He did not want these memories anymore. Following his actions, the others also made up their minds one after another. Some of them used the same method to destroy these memory balls, but some of them were reluctant to do so and put them away. However, even the experts who put away these memory spheres did not have the intention to reintegrate these memories into their bodies. They only treated them as a collection or as a treasure. If I integrate these memories, I will no longer be me. What's the use of having them? The eldest senior brother sighed, as if he was trying to convince himself, but also as if he was explaining it to the others. And this was clearly what they were really thinking at this moment. Although these memories were countless memories that they had experienced in the past hundreds of millions of years, they were still a part of them. At this time, when Luo Fan returned them to them, it was like returning things to their original owners. If they were to integrate them, there would be no other abnormalities, and they would be able to integrate them perfectly. However, things would obviously not be so perfect. It should not be forgotten that they were no longer than 9 pieces of blank paper. At this time, they had already obtained endless memories through their bodies, power, cultivation, realm, and various other things inside and outside of their bodies. Moreover, these obtained memories seemed to be the same as their original memories, but because of the different perspectives, there was an essential difference from their original memories. This essential difference allowed the few of them to form brand new personalities, and could even be said to be brand new selves. Under such circumstances, the 9 of them experienced the change when their memories were extracted, and it was equivalent to going through a reincarnation. In that case, their selves from half a month ago were equivalent to their past lives. In this way, it was obvious that the 9 of them had in fact become 2 completely different individuals from the 9 people in the past. Under such circumstances, Luo Fan had given them the memories he had extracted from their bodies half a month ago, which was equivalent to returning the memories of their previous lives to them. If they were to reintegrate these memories into their bodies and into their own memories, it would naturally be equivalent to overlaying the memories of their past lives on top of the memories of their current lives. That was simply killing the current self to recreate the self from his previous life. It was akin to sacrificing himself for the sake of others. Unless one was extremely disappointed and hateful towards this life and missed his previous life to the extreme, who would be willing to do such a thing? Who would dare to do this? As such, it was obvious that it was only natural for them to do such a thing. This was obviously the biggest disadvantage of this method. By extracting the memories, one's body, power, cultivation, realm, and so on would transmit the information from their memories to make up for these deficiencies. In the end, one would indeed be able to obtain the heart of a newborn. One would be able to look at the various actions, choices, experiences, and cultivation from a brand new and original perspective. It was highly possible for one to obtain new insights and finally break through the original bottleneck. This seemed to be an extremely exquisite and powerful method of cultivation. However, this method was ultimately sacrificing oneself for others. Although one would obtain the heart of a newborn and obtain the opportunity to break through the bottleneck, it was at the cost of one's own life. In the end, the one receiving all the results and gains would still be oneself, but it would be completely different. It was equivalent to one's reincarnation. This kind of shortcoming caused this seemingly simple, yet extremely effective method to become useless. Unless one was truly willing to give up one's self and the existence of one's life for the sake of pursuing the Tao, no cultivator would choose this method to break through the bottleneck. Chapter 971. Luo Fan was quite satisfied that they were able to see the truth and didn't blindly integrate these memories back into their bodies. If these memories were integrated into their bodies, they would still be themselves to others, the 9 strongest experts of the Hidden Armor sect. However, the willpower that they possessed would disappear because of this and be replaced by the willpower that they possessed half a month ago. Their hearts of innocence would also disappear because of this. In this way, they would naturally lose the opportunity to break through the bottleneck. For Luo Fan, this was naturally a loss. At this time, their choice saved him a lot of trouble, so he was naturally satisfied. The 9 people listened to Luo Fan's praise and nodded, but there was a bitter smile on their faces. I wonder if Elder Luo is interested in cultivating the techniques of our Hidden Armor sect? If Elder Luo is interested, you can take all the techniques of our sect. The eldest senior apprentice brother quickly recovered his mood and said to Luo Fan. Luo Fan naturally didn't mind. He nodded and said, "Since I've already joined the Hidden Armor sect, it's impossible for me to not know any of the sect's techniques. I'll have to trouble sect master to teach me." Na Suzerain's face lit up with joy. If Luo Fan didn't want to cultivate the techniques of the Hidden Armor sect, they naturally couldn't do anything about it, but they would inevitably be somewhat dissatisfied in their hearts. They would think that Luo Fan didn't place the Hidden Armor sect in his eyes at all, and even despised the Hidden Armor sect. Now that Luo Fan was willing to cultivate the techniques of the Hidden Armor sect, it naturally meant that Luo Fan had more or less acknowledged the Hidden Armor sect, which naturally made them happy. Na Suzerain smiled and raised his hand towards the depths of the Qian Tian Palace. From the depths of the Qian Tian Palace, a jade slip-like object directly flew out from the depths of the palace, and in the blink of an eye, arrived in front of Na Suzerain. He looked at the jade slip with a very solemn expression. With a wave of his hand, the jade slip lightly rotated and arrived in front of Luo Fan. Luo Fan smiled slightly and raised his hand to receive the jade slip. Although he had already obtained all the memories of these 9 people, it could be said that he knew everything that these 9 people knew. But this did not mean that he knew all the techniques of the Hidden Armor sect. After all, the Hidden Armor sect was an ancient sect that had existed for hundreds of millions of years. Even if they had never entered the Saint Realm, they were still a sect that could not be underestimated. For a sect like this, the depth of the sect's accumulation was naturally imaginable. The 9 of them were the strongest experts of this generation of the Hidden Armor sect. Each of them was at least at the intermediate stage of the quasi-sage realm. However, the Hidden Armor sect's techniques that he cultivated and knew were just a portion of it. Although it was a large part, it was still incomplete. That was exactly why Na Suzerain had asked such a question and Luo Fan had replied in such a manner. After seeing Luo Fan take the jade slip, Na Suzerain let out a long sigh and said, "This Qian Tian Hall is where we elders cultivate. If Elder Luo is willing, you can also cultivate in this hall. I'm sure you will be able to obtain some benefits." Luo Fan shook his head and said, "Forget about cultivating here. I have my own place to go, and I don't want to be restricted. After I finish using this inheritance jade slip, I will naturally return it to the sect." With that, without waiting for their reply, he turned around and moved through the void, disappearing from the Qian Tian Hall. He appeared once again. This time, he appeared in an even more dangerous forbidden area on this planet. These forbidden areas could only be entered by peak intermediate stage of the quasi-sage realm cultivators. However, for Luo Fan, they posed no threat at all, thinking that he would have to stay here for tens of thousands of years. Luo Fan did not deal with it carelessly. Instead, he directly built a temporary cave abode on top of the nest of the strongest expert in this forbidden area. Although this cave abode was temporary, it could be called a cave abode by Luo Fan. Naturally, it was not simple. On the surface, It looked like a stone house, but there was another universe inside. It was all-encompassing, almost like a boundless, chaotic void. It was filled with a kind of strange existence that seemed to be in a state of chaos. This existence seemed to be a mixture of all the power and matter that Luo Fan could create. Although it was extremely far from the true state of chaos, it already had a trace of the will of chaos. If ordinary living beings stepped into it, they would most likely be completely annihilated in an instant. And for an existence like Luo Fan, the various changes within were able to show traces of the profoundness of the state of chaos. Although it was extremely small and insignificant traces, it was still extremely rare, and it might be quite beneficial to him. At this moment, Luo Fan was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the chaotic void. His expression was incomparably calm as he held the Hidden Armor Sect's inheritance jade slip in his hand. With a thought, he poured his thoughts into the jade slip. The jade slip that could be used as the Hidden Armor Sect's inheritance jade slip was clearly not the same as the jade slips that ordinary cultivators refined to carry information. The materials used were also not ordinary jade. The material used in this jade slip was a type of warm jade that was 100 billion years old. Because this warm jade had accumulated for an unimaginable amount of time, it had unknowingly developed a trace of spirituality. If this trace of spirituality continued to develop in less than 1 trillion years, it would naturally become a true consciousness. This warm jade would then become a jade-like living being. Moreover, because it had absorbed the essence of the world for so many years, this warm jade would become incomparably powerful after becoming a true living being. Perhaps it would be too much of an exaggeration to say that it had become a true major completion quasi-sage, but it would definitely be comparable to a mid-completion quasi-sage. Unfortunately, this warm jade had already become a jade slip. It had completely lost the opportunity to develop into a true living being. Even if this trace of spirituality continued to grow and eventually reach the state of true consciousness, it could no longer be a true living being. It could only be a magic treasure that could grow into the treasure spirit of a magic treasure. Even if the power of this magic treasure was unparalleled, even comparable to a mid-completion quasi-sage, it was still only a magic treasure. It had completely lost its future and the possibility of reaching the Tao. Looking at this jade slip and feeling the traces of spirituality within it, Luo Fan could not help but sigh. Honestly speaking, he felt much better about this jade slip than he did about the Hidden Armor Sect. Although the 9 experts of the Hidden Armor Sect had changed and gained the pure hearts of children that they had lost for so many millions of years, the Hidden Armor Sect was still the same as before. There were still not many cultivators in the Hidden Armor Sect. On the other hand, this jade slip contained an extremely pure spirituality. What it naturally evolved into would also be a living being that would be free from all worldly intrusions. In the end, it would definitely be able to obtain unimaginable achievements. Under such a comparison, it was easy to imagine which one he felt the best about. However, no matter what, it was too late. At this moment, the nature of this warm jade had already changed. No matter how powerful Luo Fan was, he could not change its nature. In the end, it could only be the treasure spirit of a magic treasure. With a sigh, Luo Fan no longer felt emotional. His thoughts bypassed the trace of spirituality and directly entered the information space within the jade slip. This jade slip contained all of the inheritance techniques of the Hidden Armor Sect. The amount of information contained within had already reached an unimaginable level. This amount of information, naturally, could not be casually piled up like the information contained in jade slips refined by ordinary cultivators. The boundless information contained in it was extremely mysterious, and it naturally constructed a huge information space inside the jade slip. Or rather, it was a world of information. This world of information was vast and boundless. All of the elements that made up this world were filled with mysterious information. The sun in the sky, the clouds beneath the sun, the space beneath the clouds, and the time that ran through the entire world. The earth below, all of the things that existed on the earth, all of this was filled with mysterious information. It was filled with cultivation techniques and mysteries. Even, there were countless living beings that lived, communicated, cultivated, and transcended in accordance with special rules. The entire world of information was so wonderful that even Luo Fan could not help but sigh in admiration. Most of the information in this information world was the majority of the techniques contained in it. He had already obtained them from the memories of the 9 experts. Now that he wanted to obtain the various mysteries of this world of information, he naturally did not need to go through so much trouble. Naturally, there was no need for him to go through so much trouble. With a thought, he turned into a cloud and enveloped this world, enveloping all the things in this world that he had not obtained from the memories of the 9 experts. In an instant, endless information poured into his mind, giving him a deeper and deeper understanding of the various techniques of the Hidden Armor sect. Although the Hidden Armor sect was so fragile in Luo Fan's hands that he could almost completely destroy it with a single slap, the truth was that the Hidden Armor sect was still an extremely powerful sect. The various cultivation techniques contained within were quite mysterious, and there were hundreds of them that could lead to transcendence. In other words, there were hundreds of techniques that described how to become a great success quasi-sage. Originally, Luo Fan only wanted to obtain the cultivation techniques of the Hidden Armor sect so that he would not have nothing to do in the next 10,000 years. However, when he truly obtained the inheritance of the Hidden Armor sect, he discovered that the inheritance of the Hidden Armor sect had its own unique aspects. Although it was not enough for him to break through the terrifying bottleneck he was currently facing, it was enough for him to obtain some benefits and improve his strength. This discovery was clearly unexpected, but it made Luo Fan overjoyed. He became even more enthusiastic about the inheritance of the Hidden Armor sect. After spending 3 days to completely memorize all the inheritance information, he directly raised his hand and sent the Jade Slip. The Jade Slip directly passed through the void and returned to the Qian Tian Palace, appearing in front of the sect master eldest senior brother. Eldest senior brother Na Suzerain had been waiting for the Jade Slip to return. Although he was surprised at how quickly the Jade Slip returned, he reacted quickly and put it away, respectfully returning it to its original place of worship. As for Luo Fan, after sending the Jade Slip away, he began to close his eyes. Within his mind, the countless puppet refining methods of the Hidden Armor sect appeared. He began to analyze the countless puppet refining methods, intending to create a method that was suitable for himself and could improve his strength. There were countless cultivation methods in the Hidden Armor sect, but the more powerful one, the one that was more useful to Luo Fan, was the method to refine puppets. This was also the reason why the Hidden Armor sect was so famous throughout the universe. Puppets were different from clones. If a clone wanted to cultivate to become stronger, the amount of energy needed would be the same as cultivating the main body to become stronger. Therefore, unless there was a great advantage in numbers, clones would not be of much use in battle. In contrast, puppets were completely different. What affected the strength of a puppet were the materials used to refine it, as well as the method used to refine it. As long as the materials met the requirements and the method used to refine the puppet was exquisite enough, the puppet would naturally be stronger than its master. Therefore, a sufficiently powerful puppet would be more useful in battle than a clone. Therefore, a sufficiently powerful puppet would be more useful in battle than a clone. In the records of the Hidden Armor sect, there were great completion quasi-sages. There were even many methods to refine peak quasi-sage puppets. But, however, the materials and energy required were all extremely shocking. For example, there was a type of peak quasi-sage puppet. In order to successfully refine it, one would need to refine 30 million different universes, and a peak quasi-sage cultivator would need to spend billions of years of cultivation to successfully refine it. For example, there was a type of great completion quasi-sage puppet. In order to successfully refine it, one would need tens of thousands of tons of time laws from each universe to obtain a few hundred kilograms of time crystals. Moreover, it would require a peak quasi-sage cultivator to spend billions of years of cultivation to refine it. If the cultivation base of the cultivator who crafted this puppet was not at the great perfection quasi-sage realm, he would still be able to craft it. However, the cultivation base required would not be at the level of billions or tens of billions of years. It would be at the terrifying level of hundreds of billions or even trillions of years. Although such a puppet was extremely powerful, it was clearly of little value to Luo Fan. If he could successfully refine it, his cultivation would have probably risen to a level that far surpassed that of the puppet. Why would he still need these puppets? However, although these puppets had accumulated a lot of experience, they provided him with an idea that could allow him to become more powerful. After all, these puppets were not good enough. In that case, he could use the same idea to create a more exquisite refining method that did not require as many materials and did not require as much cultivation. The countless methods of refining puppets were constantly reverberating in Luo Fan's mind. Countless mysterious methods were decomposed in his mind. The true nature of the puppet was constantly revealed in his mind during the process of reassembling. Puppet. In fact, it was just a type of magic tool or magic treasure. However, this kind of magic tool or magic treasure had to be extremely rich and powerful in order to be able to display the corresponding level of power. Therefore, there was no difference in essence between refining a puppet of the corresponding level and refining a magic treasure of the corresponding level. Obviously, Luo Fan had accumulated the refining methods of 3 worlds. He knew a lot about refining magic treasures. Throughout the countless years of the Earth's universe, among the countless cultivators who could reach his level, there were no more than 100 people. Among them, there were even the 7 supreme sages. With his level and the countless principles and methods of refining puppets from the Hidden Armor sect as a supplement, he very quickly created countless new methods to refine puppets. Among them, each type of puppet had its own unique characteristics. Moreover, the materials and cultivation required to refine each puppet were also reduced. It was no longer as demanding as the original puppet refining method of the Hidden Armor sect. This change was clearly the effect of Luo Fan's super high utilization of power and materials. However, although he had obtained countless new methods, there was no puppet refining method that could truly meet his requirements and increase his strength. Although there were many puppet refining methods of the intermediate stage of the Sage to Be level for Luo Fan, these puppets were of no help at all. For example, the puppet of eldest senior brother Na Suzerain had already reached the peak of the intermediate stage of the Sage to Be level. Wouldn't it be a matter of slap to him? In any case, it will take more than 100,000 years to refine a puppet of the advanced stage of the Sage to Be level. How can I wait for such a long time? Luo Fan frowned and thought to himself. It was not that he could not create a puppet of the advanced stage of the Sage to Be level. It was just that the materials required to refine a puppet of the advanced stage of the Sage to Be level were secondary. The most important thing was that the time required to refine a puppet of the advanced stage of the Sage to Be level was too long. It was so long that it could not be compressed into 100,000 years. The cultivation required was also too high. Based on his current cultivation realm, it was clearly not enough for Luo Fan, who was going to enter the sanctuary in 10,000 years to challenge the creator of this world. That was why he had such a headache. What a pity! It seems that this is the limit. After spending another 10 years to refine the fastest puppet of the advanced stage of the Sage to Be level, Luo Fan finally sighed and thought to himself, after compressing the time required to refine a puppet of the advanced stage of the Sage to Be level to 108,000 years. Chapter 972. However, Luo Fan didn't really despair, even though the final result wasn't what he had expected. After all, he had an advantage over other cultivators at the peak of the intermediate tier of the quasi-sage realm. The advantage he had was none other than the traces of the profundity of the era trend that he had comprehended. The profundity of the profundity was limitless and almost omnipotent. Although refining puppets wasn't a professional, it would be of great help to him. It would allow him to turn the impossible into the possible, allowing him to refine a great-tier quasi-sage puppet within 10,000 years. Although refining puppets was only a way for Luo Fan to pass the time in order to not be bored and have nothing to do in these 10,000 years, in fact, this method was not without its merits. After all, this method was to build a brand new great-tier quasi-sage puppet. Even if it was just a puppet, it would definitely be beneficial for Luo Fan to comprehend the secrets of the transcendent realm. It would allow him to break through the shackles and become a transcendent expert. Although this was extremely tempting, it would definitely be beneficial for his cultivation. To Luo Fan, this was enough. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, he added the profundity that he had comprehended from the era trend into the method of refining puppets. Then, he started to deduce and reorganize it. Time flew by. In the blink of an eye, another 10 years had passed. On this day, a faint bright red radiance suddenly appeared on Luo Fan's body. This bright red radiance didn't spread out in all directions like before. Instead, there were many bumps and protrusions, forming a humanoid virtual figure around his body. This humanoid figure was 30 feet tall. It was clad in a suit of armor that protected its entire body from head to toe. The entire armor was a virtual figure. Naturally, it gave off an unbreakable charm. Its structure was mysterious. One could imagine how terrifying its might was. Finally, it's done. Luo Fan opened his eyes that had been shut for a long time and let out a long sigh. Bright red light rapidly shrunk as he sighed. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk into a small, bright red figure that was only a foot tall in front of him. Because it had been compressed, this silhouette was several times more solid than the one that had enveloped Luo Fan. It looked vivid and lifelike, as if it was a creature made of bright red flesh and blood. Luo Fan carefully looked at the figure. His face was filled with satisfaction. After a while, he faintly smiled and raised his hand. The bright red figure slightly trembled and directly turned back into a bright red light. Like a spirit snake, it converged into Luo Fan's body and disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. After the figure disappeared, he didn't hesitate. With a thought, he raised his hand and grabbed at the air. In an instant, one mysterious material after another appeared in front of him out of thin air. These materials were taken by Luo Fan from all over the planet with his own magical powers. There were some basic materials for refining puppets. Even so, the materials needed for these puppets at the Great Perfection quasi-sage level were almost all intangible energy materials. For example, the various types of yuan qi, the universe, space, and time. For example, special thunder fire and other mysterious materials. But that was only almost. As a puppet, the most basic material was still needed. For Luo Fan, those invisible refining materials, such as the universe, were not a problem for him. He could casually create them, but the basic material for refining puppets was a bit troublesome. Although he could create them, it was too troublesome to specially open up a world just to collect a certain material. No matter what, it was too exaggerated a method. Fortunately, this was the planet where the Hidden Armor Sect was located. The fact that the Hidden Armor Sect chose this planet meant that there were countless materials that the Hidden Armor Sect needed. In other words, they were materials for refining puppets. Therefore, the materials that Luo Fan needed could be easily found on this planet. However, it saved him a lot of trouble, allowing him to gather materials from all over the planet with just a thought. At this time, there were more than 300,000 materials in front of Luo Fan. Every single one of them, if placed in the Hidden Armor Sect, would be a main material for refining puppets. Just obtaining one would be enough to greatly increase the power of their puppets. However, in Luo Fan's hands, it was only a basic auxiliary material, and its function was only to neutralize the main materials or to bond the various main materials together. If the 9 strongest experts of the Hidden Armor Sect saw the materials that Luo Fan had chosen, they would definitely be shocked and praise Luo Fan's ability. Although no one had ever used these materials as supplementary materials for refining puppets, when these hundreds of thousands of materials were combined together, they were incomparably compatible with the way of puppets. It was as if one more would be too much, and one less would be imperfect. How could they not sigh in admiration? Luo Fan did not have any other thoughts at this time. With a thought, the hundreds of thousands of materials instantly trembled and broke down into countless tiny particles, which are then mixed together according to a certain ratio. These materials were not only solid, but many were liquid. When they were mixed together like this, an extremely violent reaction was produced. The entire void, which seemed like primal chaos, twisted and changed frantically. The grayish existence kept retreating, distancing itself from the countless particles that were mixed together, as if it was being repelled by an extremely powerful force. After the countless particles mixed together, they began to produce countless mysterious lights. These mysterious lights were extremely profound, and the colors were extremely gorgeous. The countless colors intertwined in the void, forming a strange world. There were even scenes of countless living beings living and cultivating within it. The particles below mixed together, forming what seemed like a continent, and the scene above seemed to be a reflection of the various scenes on the continent. It was truly a wondrous sight. The size of the mixture of material particles continued to shrink along with the changes, and the gorgeous colors also became purer in the process. The number of colors also continued to decrease, as if they were constantly fusing. After an unknown period of time, when all of the mysterious light turned into one, and no light or shadow could be seen within it, the mysterious light and shadow disappeared. The countless particles below had already condensed into the size of a person. The figure floated in the air, and the light seemed to be the auspicious clouds above his head. It gave off an inexplicable feeling that this wasn't an inanimate object, but a powerful cultivator who was cultivating with his eyes closed. The figure looked very complete at first glance, but if one took a closer look, they would discover that there were 365 holes on the figure. These holes were all over the figure's body. Between these holes, there were dense gaps that connected the holes together, forming a network that completely wrapped around the figure. It made the figure seem like it had experienced countless battles and was already heavily injured, as if it could collapse into powder at any time. Seeing this, Luo Fan nodded slightly. He directly began the next step. With a slight thought, the countless laws of the entire dream world slowly flowed through his mind. The great Tao hidden in the dream world appeared in front of him without any concealment, allowing him to directly comprehend the various mysteries of the great Tao of this dream world in the most direct way. When the mysteries of the great Tao, the laws, and the laws merged together, Luo Fan completely understood the space-time mysteries of this dream world. He understood all of this. A faint smile appeared on his face. Without any preparation, he opened his right hand and gently grabbed forward. As he did so, his 5 fingers began to vibrate in an extremely subtle manner, and every time they vibrated, he would be able to move his fingers. Every vibration seemed to conform to the deepest and most mysterious principles of this universe. It seemed to encompass everything in the universe. Although he grabbed with one hand, it drew out 5 mysterious trajectories. Under these trajectories, a black dot gradually appeared in front of his 5 fingers. This black dot was so pitch black and so deep, as if it was a singularity with infinite mass. It turned from illusory to real in front of his fingertips, becoming more and more obvious, and at the same time, becoming larger and larger. In the end, when his 5 fingers reached the end, the 5 singularities suddenly shook and instantly turned into 5 small universes that were not even an inch in diameter. Although these 5 universes were extremely small, they produced extremely terrifying waves the moment they appeared. The entire temporary cave abode started to shake violently with these waves, as if it could collapse and disappear at any time. Fortunately, although this was a temporary cave abode, it was extremely stable. Although it was constantly shaking due to the 5 universes being formed, it was still compressed within this cave abode in the end, so the tremors did not leak out and did not affect the planet in the outside world. If it were not for the existence of this cave abode, Even if the tremors leaked out a little, it would probably be enough to cause the entire huge planet to deviate from its original orbit, resulting in unimaginable consequences. After these 5 universes appeared, they constantly evolved. The countless galaxies within them rotated at a speed that exceeded the speed of ordinary universes by trillions of times. 5 completely different auras continuously leaked out from them. These 5 auras were all different, but they faintly resonated with each other, as if forming some kind of mysterious complement. Luo Fan looked at these 5 universes and nodded slightly. With a slight thought, the 5 universes pounced forward, directly into the human figure that was refined from hundreds of thousands of materials. They just happened to be embedded in 5 of the remaining 365 holes, 1 for each of the head and 4 limbs, confirming that this was the backbone of this human figure. As the 5 universes entered, the human figure suddenly trembled, as if it could not withstand it. Its entire body began to swell wildly, and even the originally pure, mysterious light above it began to change into 5 colors during this process. Clearly, it was affected by the 5 universes. Luo Fan had spent so much time creating this puppet refinement method, so he had naturally considered all possible abnormalities clearly. However, he had already expected such a situation. With a thought, bright red light appeared out of thin air and condensed into thin threads that directly embedded themselves into the gaps between the 365 holes, connecting the 5 universes together. In an instant, the 5 universes were interconnected and their auras mixed together, becoming extremely tame. The human figure suddenly returned to normal with this change, and its body also returned to its normal size, as if nothing had happened before. The mysterious light above it also became pure again. At this moment, everything returned to its original state. However, the radiance was slightly different from before. It had become more mysterious, more stable, and more pure. As expected, seeing this, Luo Fan knew that his plan had succeeded, and he could not help but smile. Without hesitation, he continued to grab the air with his right hand, and another 5 mysterious trajectories appeared. 5 universes were created once again. He casually sent them into the 5 holes in the human figure in front of him. Next, bright red light condensed into threads that connected the 5 universes with the previous 5 universes, forming an even more complicated network. After this change, the human figure gradually gave off a powerful aura, and the mysterious light above its head also became more mysterious and stable. It became pure. For a period of time, Luo Fan repeated the previous process. He opened up 5 universes one after another, and then continuously inserted these universes into the human-shaped hole. Then, he used threads condensed from bright red light to connect these newly inserted universes with the existing universes, forming a single entity. This process was repeated for a total of 73 times. Altogether, 365 universes were created, and they just happened to fill the original 365 holes on the human figure. When the 365 holes were filled and connected, the human figure finally became complete. Suddenly, an aura that should not have appeared on it appeared on its body. An aura of transcendence. After this transcendence aura appeared, an extremely powerful tremor suddenly occurred. The temporary cave that Luo Fan had created finally could not bear the impact of this aura, and in an instant, a loud bang rang out. Then, like a pile of sand, it directly turned into the finest powder, and along with the shock wave, it spread evenly over the entire planet. During this process, the planet also suffered an incomparably violent shock. In an instant, the entire planet broke away from its original trajectory. Like a baseball that had been hit by a bat, it directly flew out in the opposite direction of the temporary cave abode. In just a few breaths, it had already left its original orbit. In another few breaths, it had crossed the orbit of a planet outside of it. In a short while, it had already left the range of the gravitational field of the star system. The entire planet instantly dimmed, and the sun that was originally hanging high in the void became smaller and smaller. In the end, it became an ordinary star in the sky. Fortunately, the moment the cave turned into powder, the planet happened to rotate to a position parallel to the star of the star system. If the cave was in a position opposite to the star, the result would not be so good, and the entire planet would have crashed into the star. The entire planet was like a sun that was hit by a baseball bat. Naturally, the drastic changes inside and outside of the planet wouldn't be small. Countless cracks appeared on the entire planet, as if it was the end of the world. Magma, baleful aura, underground fire, poisonous fog, all of them crazily drilled out of the ground. The entire planet seemed to be disintegrating from the inside out. Fortunately, the weakest beings on the planet had the cultivation of a pure yang primordial unity cultivator, so they reacted quickly in the face of such drastic changes. They all made the appropriate response at the appropriate time. Therefore, although many of them suffered serious injuries, none of them died. This was a great fortune amidst the misfortune. Compared to the other strange beasts and living beings, this was already extremely fortunate. This change naturally triggered an intense reaction from all the living beings on the planet. Most of them did not know what was happening, and only felt that it was an indescribable apocalyptic disaster. However, the 9 experts in the Tian Palace of the Hidden Armor sect clearly sensed what was happening, and all of them were surprised and overjoyed. This aura, this is the sign of the birth of a sage-to-be puppet. Eldest senior brother, Suzerain exclaimed. He exchanged glances with the other junior brothers and sisters, their eyes filled with disbelief. At this moment, an extremely powerful aura enveloped the entire planet. This aura was so powerful that it filled the entire world, causing all living beings who were enveloped by it to feel the urge to worship it. Of course, apart from the 9 experts in the Tian Palace, the other living beings who were lucky enough to survive knelt down and worshipped it. At this moment, Luo Fan's face was full of confusion. Countless information seemed to be flashing through his eyes, and he seemed to have comprehended something. However, when he thought about it carefully, it seemed like he had comprehended nothing at all. Beside him, a burly man in mysterious golden armor with bright red eyes floated in the air. The aura that enveloped the entire planet and made everyone on the planet except for the 9 people on the planet bow down and worship, it came from him. It did not have any expression or movement, and its appearance was ordinary. However, it exuded a supreme majesty and transcendence. Anyone who saw it would feel as if it was an existence that was not bound by any shackles and had transcended everything. It was an existence that was extremely free. This was a sage-to-be puppet at the sage-to-be puppet level, or in other words, at the transcendent realm. It was a puppet that had never appeared in the history of the Hidden Armor sect, a combination of 365 universes and hundreds of thousands of materials, as well as the mysteries of the times.